Hello and welcome to The Ordeal. This is a podcast. It's called Breaking Change. My name is Justin Searles. It's my podcast, but I like to share it with you. I get asked a lot why I waste so much time making shit. Because some of the shit that I make, it always starts off as a good idea, but then I think the answer to the question is that I am really bad at estimating. And software developers are sort of famously bad at estimating because, from the perspective of a non technical person, if you ask how long something's going to take, you'll get an emotional eight ball of a response where if the developer is excited about the thing, they'll say, "Oh, that'll just take me a day," and then 3 weeks later, you'll be checking in and they'll be saying, "Oh yeah, I'm almost done," or just "I'm code complete, but I'm just testing," or "I just thought this other thing," and then rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and it takes forever. Or if they're not excited about the thing, they'll sandbag you and say, "Oh well, gosh, if you want the web page to have pictures on it, that's gonna be 4 weeks, Mister. I'm sorry." For me, because I'm in a stage in my life where pretty much everything is intrinsically motivated, uh, uh, if anything, I am overflowing with side projects, and I've got the podcast, newsletter, and blog, and all that, and I'm constantly thinking, "Ooh, I should share this. Ooh, I could come up with a pithy thing, or I could, you know, it'd be fun to do X," and it is fun, but there's always extra, what my brother likes to call goes intos, So I've got, like, for example, started up this recording today. Hello, hi, and started it in OBS. I don't know what OBS stands for. I think the S is probably streaming. I'm looking at myself in a teleprompter. I hit the intro music button. That little jingle you just heard a minute ago. And then I see an SSL2 plus loopback on my mixer go up and down, typically. SSL2 plus is the interface, the audio interface is connected to the computer here, and normally that goes up and down because the loopback channels should be representing the music that's playing, and then they just don't go up and down. And that's never happened before. So then I do a quick export and make sure, is it coming through? And of course, the answer is no. And so then I spend some time farting around with it, and nothing's working. So I quit OBS and reopen OBS, and guess what? It works. And then I hit record again, and now it says, it's got like a little exclamation point at the bottom and says, "Media encoding overloaded. Consider revisiting your video settings before you continue." And I'm like, I am on an M2 Ultra Mac Studio with like 128 gigabytes of RAM. I think I might have the bandwidth for a single 4K stream. But sure enough, that was just caused because Final Cut Pro was running somewhere in the house. As soon as you quit that, then all of a sudden the warnings go away. And that's just ephemeral stuff. That's just like stuff that kind of gets into your head along the way. To say nothing about audio editing and ducking and stuff. And I don't know if you listened to the version 52.0.1 of the podcast last time around with my friend Len, but like the audio editing for that one was like really a pain for nonsense reasons. You got to duck everyone and like make I listen to the mix. I don't know about you, but I feel like I made myself too loud and him too soft. And why was that? It was in part because there was a bug in my audio signal chain where it's like listening to the computer with my headphones, with my neutral fucking headphones. It sounded even Steven to me, and then the levels looked clear, and then I ran the export, and then they were not even. So if you're like me, you're like turning me down and him up to understand it. And part of it too is when the guest is on a condenser mic and I'm on a dynamic mic, it can sound kind of grating after a while because they're just very different styles of sound. So you spend the time coordinating the interview. You do the interview. That part's fun. And then you kind of get mired in edits for a few hours. And then you're like, okay, well, that was a day of my life. And pretty much anytime I sit down to do anything, I was telling Becky this yesterday, when I like write a blog post, I will, very often it starts as, oh, here's an interesting link. I think this person is wrong, or I think I have this like interesting take on it. So I'm going to post a take, like a quick, like 80 word, less than that, 2-sentence, pithy one-liner, and a link. And then I think, oh, let's make it a link post. And so then I have like, you know, like in my link log, I link out to that post and then I like take a block quote and then I write a little more. And then I'm like, you know what? Well, in addition to this, I really like, I could summarize my point in like 3 bullets underneath. And then I get started and I'm like, well, you know, like now I need a conclusion. So I write a little conclusion. And I'm like, well, you know, I could just make this a whole post. So then I move it from the content/links directory into the content/post directory. And before I know it, I'm editing and re-editing and rereading what is a post that merely cites somewhere in the body a link to that original thing that was the progenitor of my thoughts. And if I was a journalist, if I made a living just sitting at my computer getting mad at the creative process of writing content or whatever, that would be a productive, you know, self-assignment desk approach. I did that for years when I was like in charge of content marketing for a consulting company. I am coming around to this idea. So I'll introduce every version of Breaking Change. Every major release has a you know, it's a new big number. It has a release name or release title. This one is version 53 of the show. Hi, welcome. The title is Pod Freeze. So all that is, I guess, just dressing for something of an announcement. I've been posting shit on the internet since I was 11 years old. And I'm older than that now, although my potty mouth sometimes betrays my real age. I had an Angel Fire site. It was the very first time I had like a real fucking website that like somebody's like, hey, here, do this. And I just threw up some images and, you know, like if you've ever seen an Angel Fire or the more clearly remembered GeoCities, just a garbage ass piece of shit HTML site. I went to a computer camp the next year at University of Michigan, learned me some Java, and then in the mornings, and then in the afternoon, I learned me some Shockwave, Macromedia Shockwave, and Shockwave was a lot more fun. And then I got a job later on doing Java because if you want to make money, do the less fun thing. And that worked out pretty well for me. But I also learned more website stuff like frame sets and frames, and I got down this rabbit hole of building connections of other people who had websites. And so, you know, I got started writing video game site stuff with a friend of mine in Ann Arbor. And then I found this guy named Brian Stelter, who's now currently at CNN, and emailed him. And he and I became like a 2-person team for 3 websites in a row for several years, covering in like, for example, in 2001, Nintendo's Space World Expo and the reveal of the GameCube. Stelter was even younger than me, but he had like, I guess, well-connected parents. And so he knew a guy named Steve Kent, who was working at MSNBC at the time on a tech beat, or maybe MSNBC.com. And he was like there on site. And so we actually had like a dude on the inside and we were able to push out stories really quickly. Did another site called at E3. When that stuff started to wind down a little bit, I went to a site called Nintendojo and wrote reviews and wrote news for years. And then I guess I got sick of the Nintendo beat and started blogging kind of like a comedy blog, just locally sourced, just in high school with several of my friends, called Framed Poster. And kept doing that for through the first 6 months or so of college. But then as college starts heating up, you know, I wouldn't say I was like present and in person. I would say I enjoyed my freshman year of college, which is, if you've lived in a dorm for your freshman year of college, if you had fortunate enough to have that experience, especially at a smaller school, the whole year of my life was just sort of on rails. And they kept me busy. And then by the time my sophomore year rolled around, this website called thefacebook.com came out. And pretty soon everyone was obsessed with that, right? So we had early access to that because we had these .edu, shiny new edu addresses, and we were walking around campus. And I had very quickly, it was within a couple weeks that I had picked up on, hey, this girl friended me on Facebook. But then when I walk by her on the path, she does not acknowledge my existence. And of course, it's before smartphones, and it's before even most people have laptops. I remember actually the studio I worked in down there, where I was making Nightsite, this bibliography generator. One of my colleagues was charged with designing a logo for the wireless fidelity internet on campus. And this is before that the world had just sort of agreed that these upward facing, 3 or 4 arcs to indicate both Wi-Fi and also the signal strength for Wi-Fi, where she had to like invent an icon for Wi-Fi. And she came up with something actually very similar. Emily's really smart. Still really smart, I'm sure. So yeah, I got kind of suckered into the social media content posting game for a long time, like a lot of people. You fell out of blogging. You got to go where the people are. Got into Facebook, and then a good buddy of mine, Mark Van Holstein, who went on to found Mutually Human Software up in Grand Rapids, another kind of Ruby consultancy. He and I were housemates in college, and we loved getting each other into trouble by addicting the other one to really bad ideas. So he just reminded me a couple weeks ago that I'm the one who convinced him to start playing World of Warcraft. And then I quit World of Warcraft. And then he just like continued the addiction for me for several years after that. He had a fun time, right? But it's probably not good for your health. He, one day, shortly after graduation, I think it was 2008. I don't know, 2009. He's like, hey, turns his laptop around. You sign up for this Twitter thing? Because like it was at that point, it was like something that like Rails developers would have known about, because Twitter was famously then a Rails app, although no longer. And I was like, I don't know, and I took my handle, and then very slowly over the years, I just watched my post count go up and up and up. So I was always posting. I posted through my entire life, basically, just through different channels. And I'm sure while a lot of us have been experiencing the internet through a lot of different means and mediums and in different ways and its different permutations, right? And smartphones come out, and that's its whole can of worms. And then we all know the recent history, right? Twitter blows up. There's this sort of like social media diaspora, which is what led me to build Posse Party, so I could just have a blog and then fling all my shit everywhere at once. The difference is that like I am a content creator. I am a poster. I was just telling Becky yesterday, like a sin that I commit is that I put a lot of shit into the world with very little regard for what other people are doing. Like I love relationships. I love hearing about people. I love asking about their lives, but I just don't generally consume other people's content. I don't listen, especially about stuff that I do. Like I don't listen to podcasts about software. I don't read people's software blogs. I read some blogs, but mostly for their newsworthiness and or utility, raw utility of like, this person has really good advice on how to tackle this set of problems, so I'll take a look at it. But that's even that's pretty rare. And when it comes to social media, even in the early Facebook, when the Facebook feed came out, I ignored the feed and just looked at the activity. Same with Twitter. I never looked at the feed. I just looked at my notifications. I'm just, it's a sickness. And I talk about it here sometimes in terms of this void in my soul. I've got this just deep, dark stew of a need for generic human validation. I need to feel like other people know that I continue to exist, and that soothes some sort of tumor inside of me. And I like them to like me. And in lieu of that, I like them to think of me because I think I just want to be remembered. I talk about the word legacy a lot, and it sits in my head. And when people I know die, I think about their legacy a lot. Not to say I judge them for it, but like I've friends who've passed who don't get remarked upon very much anymore, and friends who do. And I want to be one of the ones who do, because, you know, if I'm going to stop existing, I want to at least still fester, you know, in the zeitgeist. So yeah, it just occurred to me recently that regardless of whether I feel joy or happiness or contentment from posting content onto the internet, or creating things for the purpose of mass consumption by multiple people as opposed to prioritizing one-on-one bidirectional relationships like a well-adjusted human, even if all that's great and going really well, I don't know what it's like to not do it. I was prepubescent when I started this. I'm post-pubescent now, ladies. Just so we all know. But still, like, I've decided to undergo an experiment. I don't have a name for it. Let's call it a hiatus. I am going to go on a content hiatus. And that's going to look like a few things. Because I've successfully created this choke point of content that everything runs through my blog. If I just stop posting to the blog, I will effectively have stopped posting everywhere, because I don't go directly into any social media anymore. So the plan is, and by plan I mean the sentence that I'm speaking right now and kind of making up as I go. The plan is, I think I'm going to take some indeterminate amount of time. It could be a month. It could be a year. It could be forever. I don't know. I don't fucking care. I'm going to just stop posting shit to the blog. I'm going to stop my newsletter, take a little break from the monthly Swirls of Wisdom. I'll write one final one because a lot of those people, more people subscribe to that than this. I don't know why. You're the real OGs. You're the real troopers here. Of course, if this is the last thing in this feed, you might be listening to this and be like, what the hell am I listening to? And it's like, oh, it's this guy saying he's not going to do this anymore. He could have saved me a step and just put that right at the top. But, you know, version 54 may come. I don't know. I've still got a whole show. The only reason I'm doing this is I already made the show notes, so I got to sunk cost fallacy, right? That's when I have the idea, right? And then it takes too long to build a thing. You know, halfway through, you're like, well, I've come this far. And so I didn't want to, like, let these show notes go to waste. So the show must go on for that reason, so I can check these boxes and then stop making new boxes. Yeah, so no podcast, no newsletter, no blog, and therefore no real posting. It means I'm going to have to retrain my brain. When I see something interesting on the internet, I'm going to have to just sit with my feelings, or share them with a friend, or talk it out. Or when I identify a new bug in a piece of software, instead of, you know, tweeting it out at the CEO, I might actually have to open a goddamn support ticket. Well, we'll see about that. But yeah, I'm a cold turkey kind of guy. So I don't know how long it's going to be, but I'm going to just hit pause. So hence the title Pod Freeze. And that's, see, that only took me 20 minutes to explain. Let's get on with some of the life shit. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have a wonderful spouse. Her name is Becky. You can find her, since this might be my last communique. the last transmission. You can find her currently at betterwithbecky.com or beckygraham.com, which is her visual forward blog website with lots of reels and pictures and words. She was in Columbus for the Arnold, this big convention of bodybuilders and weightlifters. Columbus, Ohio. I think it's the biggest one. It was like coming up on 50 years. It's a big deal. And when we lived in Columbus for 11, 12 years, we never had occasion to give a fuck about it other than that traffic was worse and that there's a whiff of spandex in the air for a 4 or 5 day period. And if you have to fly in or out of Columbus during that weekend, then you're definitely not going to want a middle seat, because you're going to have some very broad-shouldered individuals flanking you. Well, now that she's in the bodybuilding game, she wanted to go and participate. So she went. She's in Columbus. She was in Columbus. And meanwhile, I'm building this PC, which I'm looking over here. I've now successfully completed my second small form factor gaming PC. The first one was black and a slim 18 liters. And the new one's a little bit bigger, about 19 liters, but much, much easier to get into and monkey around with. And I had a AMD 9700 XT, whatever the current best AMD graphics card is. And I was forking around with it. And for the price, it just wasn't that impressive. It wasn't that great. And of course, AMD is known for piss poor driver support and dropping older cards pretty much immediately as soon as their next generation comes out. And so I was, for the marginal cost savings versus just getting the slightly more expensive NVIDIA one, I don't think this is going to have the legs. So I was hemming and hawing about this, and I told Becky, hey, I'm looking at 5080s, and I know we're going to Miami soon. I was thinking like we could go to Micro Center, because at least there it's going to be, Micro Center, the computer parts retailer, they sell parts at MSRP. They do not mark their shit up typically unless their supplier has marked it up to them, which makes them just god tier in the PC gaming subreddits and forums. Anyone who lives near a Micro Center essentially pays during times like this, where RAM and SSDs and GPUs are all getting marked up to hell. Building any kind of computer thing is literally 20, 30, 40% cheaper if you have a Micro Center in your metro region. And Columbus has one, Miami has one, Orlando doesn't. And so I'm looking on Facebook Marketplace, and I'm looking at like these cards that are used and $1,500, $1,600 for a card that MSRP's at $999. And I'm like, well, there's this one that's kind of good enough that's in stock at Micro Center. I could reserve it, and then when we're in Miami next week, we could go pick it up. And I was just asking her, hey, is it okay if we have this like 1 hour out of the way drive while we're down in Miami, ostensibly on a, little fun couples retreat, so that I can buy my computer stick? And she, I think, might have actually misunderstood me, because she was in Columbus and she was actually going to be right by where their Micro Center is. And she's like, oh yeah, I could pick it up for you. And I put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, oh my goodness, yes. Then I don't have to drive more. So get yourself a woman who will interrupt her own vacation to buy you a graphics card from Micro Center. So that's how I wound up with what is it called? An Asus Prime 5080 for a smooth $1,269, which is only slightly above its MSRP. But it's one of just a handful of 5080 cards that is designed to fit into a small form factor PC. It's a svelte 320 millimeters long. And now that thing's built, and it's a performer. Whole PC works great at, not cheap, but a third of the price of my other one. And now I just got to figure out how to fucking get that to Japan in one piece without any shearing or disintegration or overly curious TSA and CBP officials getting their hands on stuff. So I've never traveled with a computer-ass computer before, but when you start researching how to do this correctly, it is likely to dissuade you. So I was gonna say stay tuned for how this goes, but like possibly you'll never know unless you write me an email and ask. Which, by the way, you're free to do. Just because I'm not posting stuff on the internet, it's like I will still be checking my email. So Justin at Searles. If you don't know how to spell it by now, it's too late. Justin at Searles.co. Shoot me an email. Ask me, hey, did your PC fall apart in transit? Because if so, you resisted the urge to complain on the internet about it, which I would consider growth. Speaking of Miami, we took our first serious, like more than an hour and a half, more than 2 hour car ride with the Tesla, where full self drove us. Well, first me. She actually, thanks to all of our fun travel shenanigans in this nation, she actually had to change plans and fly directly into the Miami area. So I was driving down with the Tesla Solo, and I will say, having full self-driving just handle everything, where like your only job is to watch the road and then drink too much Gatorade. The battery lasts longer than my bladder, I will say. That was the going concern, is like, oh, we got to get to a service center on this toll road, not because I need more charge, but because I really got to piss. Because if you're just watching your car drive itself and you've got like a cooler of sodas and stuff with you, which I started the journey with. That was the limiting factor. Was not, so we talk about range anxiety, and I'm like, I've got piss anxiety. I don't want, I guess if it's full self-driving and you've got a bunch of empty bottles, you could solve that problem yourself some other way, but I've got too much pride for that. My windows are slightly tinted, but I don't know if they're like beyond the point of indecent exposure charges tinted. So I did the right thing, and I was gonna say I pulled into the service center, and by I pulled in, I mean I clicked things on a screen and then it pulled in and parked itself. Yeah, it went well. It went really, really well. I didn't have to touch the anything on the car at all. From my garage, inside my garage, I hit the go button. It goes all the way down to Miami. It gets all the way down to the condo building where we have an Airbnb. And then it blows past it. And then takes a wrong turn. And then winds up in the middle of the busiest avenue in Brickell, downtown Miami. And then it says, okay, we're here. And there's nowhere to turn to the right. And there's nowhere to turn to the left. No turn signal. Just stops. I'm done now. And I'm looking around and I'm like, well, I am paying attention, but I am also not the most confident downtown city driver. I've never been to downtown Miami, like quite in this location. I don't know where I am. And looking at the map, it says that I'm where I'm supposed to be, but I'm looking around and there's not a condo building there. And so then I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm just going to drive in circles until I figure something out or find a place I can pull over and figure out where the fuck this thing is. So it did the easy part perfectly, and the hard part, which is why I bought this fucking vehicle, because I hate driving in urban environments, it shat the bed real hard. So not the best experience. The only other kind of notable Tesla thing is that on the way back, it was the first time I really experienced, maybe because I just did a better job of fluid intake. On the way back, it was telling us, okay, so I got to charge at this service station, and you'll be at 26% battery or something like that. We'll charge you up, and then, when you get home, you'll have 10% battery remaining, because it's trying to min-max it so that you're spending the least amount of time and least number of dollars at a charger. And so if you end up at home with just 10% battery left, that should be fine, because you're going to plug in and then charge up. Except, I just don't... Sort of like how programmers are bad at estimates, like most machines are bad at progress bars and estimating how much battery is going to be left after a multivariate calculus of factors occurs. And I was pretty skeptical. So it stops at the first charge and it charges me up until 48%. And it says, okay, that's enough. And then I get on the road again. And then within 5 fucking minutes, its estimate is, oh, when you get home, you'll be at 10%. And then it was 8%. And then it was 6%. And then it was 5%. And then it's like all of a sudden rerouting because you won't have enough battery to get home. And I'm like, motherfucker. So I'm going to now there's not a service center. And so it's like literally getting off the expressway or the tollway to, pay the toll, get off, find a other charger. And I was able to route it and find a better, regardless, the point being, you could have just stayed at that first charger for another 5 fucking minutes and been totally fine. But instead, you flew a little too close to the sun, buddy. Just had to fucking force it. What a show off. It's not perfect. I don't know. Better than having a car that drives itself is never fucking leaving in the first place, or living someplace where you can make it somebody else's problem. Having good public transit, being able to walk around. Probably the most exciting thing to me about our condo that we're buying in Shizuoka is being able to just walk out the door and do a thing and not have to worry about parking in vehicles and all that stuff. It lowers the barrier just enough that for whatever reason, when I'm in that kind of environment, I go out a lot more and I do a lot more things. And when I'm here, it's just enough friction that right now I'm at home talking at my computer, so figure it out. I had a dermatologist appointment that got me out the door. I really like my dermatologist. She is funny. She seems really good at what she does. But she's on leave right now. And so I've got this other dermatologist who's also very good, but less funny. But I have this, I had a thing. I had a thing that I had to get taken care of. I'm not going to tell you about the thing because it was just a mole that was getting abrased and I wanted it removed. So that's the thing that I wasn't going to tell you, but why would I care? It's just a mole. She removes it, uneventful, bandages me up, and then I get the portal notice, afterwards. You say, hey, you got an update in your portal. I log into the portal, and it looks like whatever got typed in by either her or her assistant just gets copy-pasted whole cloth into the portal, and I saw that there were sections that were just about how things were going that had nothing to do with the mole per se. It says, an examination was performed, including the back. General appearance of the patient is well developed and well nourished. Which is it would make sense to consider that for children, right? I don't know if you're a mandatory reporter of Child Protective Services when a kid comes to you and they're starving to death. But I'm glad I have been eating more. I've been bulking up a little bit. So maybe well nourished is a euphemism. Maybe she can tell I've put on a few pounds. I don't know. Next line, orientation. Alert and oriented. High praise. And then said ×3. Does that mean on a scale? On a scale of 5, I'm alert and oriented? Does it mean I'm 3 times more alert and oriented than the average person in Florida receiving skincare? And then the last line killed me. God, I can't. They shouldn't just paste this into the portal, but then again, in the interest of transparency, they absolutely should. It says mood and affect, pleasant. So look at me. I'm going to put that on my goddamn tombstone. Justin, he of the pleasant mood and affect. I'm sure lots of people in my life would love to meet that Justin, but alas. Meanwhile, that same week I had to get a CT scan, and just follow up stuff from all the nose shit that I did last year. The CT scan report was full of similarly funny just turns of phrase. One at the very end called me grossly, my skull, my brain cavity is what it's talking about. Referred to it as grossly unremarkable. So that made me feel less good than the dermatologist report. But you know, you just got to roll with it. They're the experts, not me. So I guess it's just something I get to live with now. Speaking about things where I am an expert, let's follow up on what else has been going on. I don't know that I've talked about it too much on the here on the pod, but I have a tonal, which is like a $5,000 electromagnet that you have installed onto a wall, and it's basically it's a cable machine for weightlifting, and it comes with a big screen in the front, and it's got workouts, and it's I would call it semi-intelligent. You can pick from any of 200 movements. And it'll know you and know your relative strength and stuff historically. And so it'll guess how much weight you should be doing based on a number of factors, how recovered you are and so forth. And in general, it results in a very nice, low, if you're like me and you just want to be told, hit the button, go like this with your arm 5 times, and then hit the button, and then you're done. Congratulations. And you don't want to think any harder about weightlifting, which is generally true for me. It's a good tool. But like all good tools, it costs $60 a month for no fucking reason. Even though I have for many months now just been doing custom workouts, not using any of their content, just literally just picking the movement, hitting the button, doing the movement, and then turning it off. And I still do it every other day, but I didn't feel like I was getting $60 of subscription value out of it. And then looking ahead to being overseas, it's like, they don't sell these in Japan. I don't necessarily want one. I'll go to a real gym again. Revisit the conversation about being able to walk to things like gyms. So I decided I was going to unsubscribe. If you unsubscribe from a tonal, it basically reverts in. Granted, I guess it is a blessing that it still works at all, that the $5,000 machine doesn't become a literal fucking brick, but it basically becomes a completely stupid cable machine with no intelligence whatsoever, except for some upsell ads now and then telling you, hey, you should if only you subscribed, then you'd be able to get tracking and all this. It tracks your total number of amount of weight and volume that you've ever done and all this other stuff. All the tracking turns off. There's an Apple Watch integration where it works with Apple Watch, workouts and so forth. But most importantly, the Apple Watch integration I view as a safety feature, because you can actually decrease the weight. And you also have one extra button that's attached to one of your hands to disengage the weight, which, when using the rope accessory or something without a smart button on it, is, from my perspective, a safety feature. Well, that safety feature is not available to you if you aren't subscribed, so the watch integration just doesn't work anymore. Of course, it's not going to guess how much weight you can lift because there's no movements. It's just going to say, hey, are you using the bars or the handles? And then you set the weight. It has these things called eccentric and smart flex and spotter. These are all modes that will dynamically adjust the weight. On the eccentric movement, it'll make it heavier while you're not lifting, so that you have to kind of force and learn how to control and balance and move slowly in the eccentric movement, where counterintuitively, even though that's you exactly not lifting the thing, it's where a lot of the muscle build can happen. Smart flex, where if you've got some extra gas in the tank, it'll actually dynamically increase the weight to take full advantage of your ability to lift. These are all really cool features. All that's gone. It's just a dumb thing. And I knew that going into unsubscribing, and it was enough to scare me off and kept me paying $60 a month for a couple extra months. And then I decided, you know what? No, I'm going to give it a try. And after unsubscribing, and it's just a dumb thing, because I'm already using Build with Becky's strength training program, which is available again for purchase at betterwithbecky.com. I not only am I her, software developer, I am also a customer. I use that for my workouts and to track my workouts. You click start workout, you see the whole little player there. You can here's my 4 basic movements, and I go set that up, and I go because I was doing that anyway, like it's actually fewer clicks and less steps to just do the unsubscribed dumb panel. So in addition to saving $60, I'm spending less time and I'm sort of also forced to learn more. And so I'm more comfortable in a physical gym now because I'm no longer subscribed to this thing, because I have to actually think, oh yeah, how much weight am I able to do? Because I'm like looking at the number because I have to pick the right number myself. Things like that. So that's pretty fucking rad, actually. I'm glad to be free of, how much money is that going to be? Like, I don't know, $720 a year? That's some decent walking around money. You know, I could buy you a small house in Japan. So, cool. Other follow-up thing, I'd mentioned that I was going to be on the Free Code Camp podcast. This has occurred. They have launched the episode. It is worth listening to if you're interested in my takes on beginner developers and their current degree to which they are or are not fucked. The long and short of it is scrappiness, I would say, from a frontline worker perspective, is probably the most important single trait, and that cuts across whether or not you're a senior developer or a junior developer. It has been qualified by a lot of people, I think, but early on by me. I want the credit for that. That it's people who love code to build a thing, or to see an outcome, or to have created a thing that's for use in the world. Those people are happy as a clam right now, and their ambitions are just unleashed by AI tools. And the people who love coding for the sake of coding, like, they are in trouble. And they might not realize it, but a lot of them are having, you know, self-protective and defensive reactions out of the threat of losing that. Now, granted, no one's going to stop you from being a hobbyist programmer, but that set of people have had it pretty good, that they've been able to get a really good living while also just doing their favorite thing all day. And that's changing. But for junior developers, I have found that many of them are doing really, really well. But it does rely on, you know, changing how you think and being a little bit more independent. Because if you're just looking for certifications, if you're just looking to like follow a book, if you're just looking to like, you know, learn how to code and then expect something to be handed to you because you've checked a certain number of boxes, or you know particular incantations and functions, and you can achieve certain things technically, that's not sufficient. And I'll link to my, what am I linking to? I'll link to my merge commit, which is like a podcast feed where I'm the guest. I'll link to my summary post of this Free Code Camp podcast. And if you do nothing else, just click through to the YouTube and read the comments. Because especially people on YouTube, but when you come into contact with like mainstream opinions of AI, boy, yeah, some people have some strong feelings. I thought it was fascinating. Just different sorts. So yeah, check that out. Had a couple posts that I liked recently, which I guess is good because they're gonna be on the front page of my website for a while, by the sound of things. One was, I think, titled "Dual Loop BDD is the new red-green TDD." Basically, a lot of people have figured out that test-driven development works really well for software agents. Why? Because if you just tell a software coding agent, hey, go build this thing, it will build it and then say done. And then you'll get into that same pattern of, okay, well, did you run it? No. Did you test it? No. All right, well, you want me to run it, so I'll run it. Hey, guess what? It doesn't work. And then you're kind of back and forth. And just by saying, do test-driven development, it will at least think about, how will I run it? You know, and it'll write a test. And if it's nowadays, you know, the models are smart enough and the harnesses are smart enough that like it'll put real assertions in the test. And if you instruct it, hey, run the failing test before you write the solution, then at least you'll be sure that the failing test executes for the expected reasons. Well, I wouldn't say sure, but more likely. and then make it pass. And if you do that much, you are likely to get at least a function, a dollop of code that will do what that unit test said. What I have found, though, is that if you go down that route, you'll end up with, indeed, a lot of functions and a lot of unit tests, but they might all still just be in one gigantic file and completely opaque. And the overall application won't necessarily work. So what I did was I reached for an old behavior-driven development, or BDD, trick of, instead of thinking of a single test-driven development loop, think of a dual loop where it's like, all right, the very first test is actually open up a browser, open the application, click on the application as if you're a real person. That feature doesn't exist yet, but you're still describing, and you could use tools like Cucumber, which uses like given, when, then language, or you could kind of go the extra mile and just sort of imagine the selectors or what the buttons or something, even though before they exist, and you're writing the failing integration test first. And you're specifying what you want it to do. That's going to fail because that code doesn't exist yet. And then you dive into a concentric inner loop where you do a lot of unit test TDD. And then when that bigger integration thing finally is ready to pass in it, and you can massage it into passing, then you can move on to the next feature. And this keeps the agent on task, in the sense that, and by agent, it could just as well mean developer. This was a very useful tool for me when I was consulting at companies that were new to any kind of testing and any kind of more agile ways of working in 2010, 2011, 2012. I would very often reach for dual loop BDD with them because it was a great way to focus product owners and teams around a shared goal of what are we really solving for? What are our acceptance criteria? So I updated my prompt in Prove It to start to inject that into every single plan. And now, instead of just getting 1,000 unit tests and a integrated app that doesn't really work, I'm getting the same super high code coverage, but some proof that when integrated, everything is working. Even for apps with complicated user interfaces, even with Swift UI and Apple stuff. Now, getting all the Swift UI native Apple stuff to work in CI is a separate ordeal that I still have not solved for exactly. It's going to probably involve running a bunch of what are called tart VMs, I don't know, on my Mac Studio as a remote GitHub runner, because I just don't want to pay like $1 a minute or whatever the fuck for a cloud-based Mac OS. But it's going great. Yeah, so check that out. I also wrote a think piece disagreeing with Ben Thompson. He's the author, what of Stratechery. Really smart guy, very accomplished technical financial analyst. Lived in Taiwan for a long time, has gone back to, I think, Racine, Wisconsin. I'm not sure I'd call it an upgrade. Also drives a full self-driving Tesla. He's a really smart guy. I've never met him. I know people who know him, and they say he is indeed a smart guy, which is important. I like to have that personal connection with my bloggers. And he was just super fucking dead wrong. What would have been Monday? His post was incorrect because it conflated that like LLMs, the black box that translates tokens of input into tokens of output, that those are to be assumed to be tightly integrated to their harnesses, like a Claude code, like a ChatGPT product, like the broader software system that is leveraging those LLMs and invoking them. But the truth is that those LLM APIs are like totally fungible and identical pretty much everywhere. And while you can around the edges train the LLM to be aware of or have reinforcement learning inside of its particular preferred harness, that is to say, like Anthropic has told us that they train Claude using Claude code. So the Claude code that's under training, under reinforcement learning, is using Claude code. And so therefore the post-trained model that poops out the other end of their process has a tighter integration with Claude code than, say, Codex CLI or some other third-party or open source agent harness. And that can be true, but it's not fundamentally true. It's true incidentally, but it's not the most important thing. And so his entire post went on to assume that. And I was like, look, man, like models are clearly the most expensive thing. They require a lot of base research, a lot of hard science. They get a lot of attention because they happen to be attached with viral popular products of harnesses. But ChatGPT is just a harness. Claude Code is just a harness. And that the frontier models put them out there, OpenAI and Anthropic, respectively, that's just good marketing. That's a proof of concept. It's a way to convince the world, buy our APIs, buy our tokens. And yes, they kind of fancy themselves product companies because it's way harder to raise trillions of dollars and to capture the attention of the entire economy if you're just some invisible API or some low-level system, right? People think about OpenAI because of ChatGPT. People think of Anthropic because of Claude. Meanwhile, you look at like the data center discussion, and it's just like all these hyperscalers get bundled in together. You know, CoreWeave and all these other ones, like they come and go, and they could stop talking about it forever, and nobody would ever notice that they were gone. So it makes the brands stickier. But apart from that, like models are just the expensive part, and over time, the cost of inference is going to go down, the cost of training is going to go down, and more open and local models will become good enough for a lot of tasks. And what we're finding is it's really the harness. The harness is the thing. That's the software part. What's the thing running the loop? What are the tools that interact with the real world? What the tools are the thing that get the thing done, and the LLM is just the thing making the decisions. Yes, you can get better decisions, but also if you make mediocre decisions and you just have more time, or you have a harness that can actually ensure that the result is right before you proceed, you don't need the best decisions. Everyone's everyday life should be evidence of that. Look at how many. Whenever I used to get stressed in airports, rushing to my gate, freaking out that we're going to get in trouble at the border crossing because I have shaving cream, in an aerosol, whatever it is. Chewing gum during the border entry into New Zealand, where they're like, if you've got any sort of biological contaminant on you, we will kill you. We will turn you into sheep fertilizer. They have big scary signs. Like a picture of an apple with like a guy going to jail. She used to say, hey, Justin, remember, people dumber than you, like countless millions of people dumber than you do this every day and they're fine. You can go a long way in life making pretty shitty decisions. So I don't think the model being perfect is going to be the thing that unlocks all this. I think the harness being good enough and accessible enough and capable enough at both the set of verbs that an LLM can be used to decide to do, as well as the set of verifications and qualifications and the reinforcements and the feedback. All that's the harness stuff. That's the hard part. And that's where I wrote a piece called Models Are Commodity and Harnesses Are Differentiators. So that's me planting a flag in the sand. I don't think that the models are going to ultimately matter that much. I think that the harnesses are, and it's possible that OpenAI and Anthropic will also be harness leaders forever, but it seems more likely to me that if there's going to be a couple of folks in a garage somewhere building a startup real scrappy-like, it's probably going to be a couple people who are building a harness that uses other people's models, or Open Router and multiple models, or whatever. So that's this tranche of content that I got going on. I think it's probably time for a pun. I hope it's a good one. All right, well, this might be the last pun for a little while. Some amount of while. But without telling him I was imminently planning a hiatus, I did give Aaron a chance to offer up a better pun last night, because I didn't record right when I thought I would. He said, nope. So he stands by the pun, which I have not read, but will read now. Season 3, as it were, traditionally Breaking Change has had seasons that are tied to the corporeal calendar, Gregorian calendar year. So this would only be the 5th pun of 2026. But that's how it rolls. Here we go. Version 53's pun. Did you hear about the Olympic curler that got caught touching the curling stone with their hand? I don't know if they got in trouble, but they're definitely on thin ice. This did happen. I did hear about a curling scandal. And separately on Upgrade, Jason Snell, who is a curling fan, said that everyone does this and that the refs rarely call it. Did you hear about the Olympic curler that got caught touching the curling stone with their hand? I don't know if they got in trouble, but they're definitely on thin ice. It's all right. For some reason, curler makes me think like hair curler, like just kind of going through what else could have been done to zhuzh this up a bit, because it's a straightforward one, unless I'm missing something. Thin ice, okay. When I think about being on thin ice, I think of you're out on a pond, right? And like you might fall into some water beneath. When I think about curling, I think it's probably just a little bit of ice and then I don't know, concrete beneath. Like I don't expect that like you're going to fall into some pool. But okay, I get it. I'm familiar with the idiom. Okay. I guess I got my job is not to write the puns, it's to rank the puns. So we've had 4 before. I'll read them all now for posterity. Current number 4. I heard bees make good detectives because they're experts at sting operations. Number 3. If you think about it, the idea that the Earth rotates around the sun is still revolutionary. Number 2. I have nothing but respect for helicopter parents. I can't imagine how hard it is to raise a helicopter in this climate. And number 1, so far on the year, version 49. Had to fix our washing machine over the weekend, and I really didn't want to do it. The biggest problem with repairing a washing machine is that you can't just throw in the towel and expect it to work. That one's still the best. Helicopter parent one I like a lot, in particular because hotter, drier climates, helicopters work worse. It's like a possibly accidental science deep cut. The ice is also thinner thanks to climate change, one supposes. If you think about it, the idea that the Earth rotates around the sun is still revolutionary. And I like that one too because it's also like a flat earther deep cut where a not small percentage of Americans probably, whether they truly believe it or just to kind of like, you know, burnish their credentials as an anti-authoritarian, will claim to be suspicious of this revolutionary world thing. So that, I think all 3 of those are better than this one. Which then has me questioning, is this or version 50's pun better? I heard bees make good detectives because they're experts at sting operations. That one's tight. It's simple, it's tight. Same, you know, if we're talking about difficulty, I think the same difficulty score. And And so then after that point, it's really just all execution. That's it. This. Copy. Paste. That's it, man. Pasting in very slowly, methodically, because my editor is cranky today. There we go. The 5th ranked pun. Did you hear about the Olympic curler that got caught touching the curling stone with their hand? I don't know if they got in trouble, but they're definitely on thin ice. That's, sure, it might be last place, but it's also a top 5 pun. All right. Well, Aaron doesn't listen to these anyway, so he won't be too upset. Let's get on to the news. United Airlines, even people I know with like loyalty status at United who always fly United are rarely like fans of United. But finally, they did something that we can all get behind. At least all of us on this program. Us of the higher socioeconomic status. Us of the people who know what a Bluetooth is. Us of the people who are, you know, tightly wound enough to be very concerned with how much we disrupt those around us. United Airlines has updated their rules where they can boot your ass off a flight if you refuse to wear headphones when you're consuming your content. So you might think that you're cool by, like, you know, listening to Breaking Change on your speakerphone. Got to be careful. Got to choose your airline wisely. If your plan is to just scroll TikTok, sans headphone, because United Airlines could now take it out. Either, I guess, just open the exit door or let the Boeing craft do that on its own, and then toss your ass right out of there. The opportunity to throw somebody off of a plane is limited, right? Like, you've got the post-boarding all clear for all call or whatever they call it, right? Before that boarding door closes. In that window, throwing somebody off a plane is pretty straightforward. But if something goes wrong in all of those middle parts, I think they just take the telephone wire and tie you down. But I don't know. Not an expert. Anyway, this is the quote from the article. WAPO's reporting. We've always encouraged customers to use headphones when listening to audio content, and our Wi-Fi rules already remind customers to use headphones. United spokesman Josh Freed said in an email, adding that the carrier is expanding its high-speed Starlink connectivity. It seemed like a good time to make that even clearer by adding it to the contract of carriage, which sounds like a phrase from a different century, but I suppose carriages are from a different century. Good job, United. You win a point. Meta, Facebook, you lose a point. Turns out those cool Meta glasses that I was walking around with were watching me pee. There was an article at a website I'd never heard of, svd.se, which of course everyone knows it is Svenska Dagbladet, which, judging by the little circle umlauts over the A, I don't know what that diacritic is called, but I associate it with Nords. I don't know if it's Swedish or what. Man, Europe's got to get on top of this cookie warning bullshit. Yeah, so anyway, people are naked, and the people who are reviewing your shit on Meta, like, okay, so I'll back up. You buy the Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses. You put them on your face. You pair them with your phone. You can ask the AI dingus, hey, tell me what I'm looking at. You can say, hey, like what's 1 + 2, whatever. You can also capture videos and audio. What this article seems to say is like a lot of things, you have a review not just for moderation, but also for post-training, for making sure that, like, you know, things are working correctly, whatever, for classification of items and so forth, where it gets passed to some human reviewer that's usually in a third world country that's not paid very much. And somebody went and interviewed those people. And you definitely get the impression, if you read this article, that it's not just the times when people are talking to the AI. It's not just like when the glasses have been activated explicitly for the purpose of, asking something explicitly. Just sort of passively, either these things are getting accidentally activated, and therefore capturing kind of sensitive content, or they're just always fucking on. One of those, who can say? But these reviewers are then like seeing butts and stuff, and they're seeing things that people probably don't want to share, including like sex and things. And not just cool stuff too, but probably just gross shit a lot, because like humans are disgusting biological specimens, and we do some pretty sick shit. And then we take the poorest among us, and we make them click buttons and type words to say what the shit is, so that I guess we can ask AI questions about, is our stool too loose or too firm? And get reasonable answers. Anyway, a pull quote. There are also sex scenes filmed with the smart glasses. Someone is wearing them having sex. That is why this is so extremely sensitive. There are cameras everywhere in our office, and you're not allowed to bring your own phones or any device that can record, an employee says. Yeah, so the work of doing this classification review, because they know what's on it. Separately, someone may have been walking around with the glasses or happened to be wearing them, and then the person's partner was in the bathroom, or they just come out naked. Yep. I don't know what you expected. I incidentally, before this report hit, I returned mine. I'd gone through 3 because like the fit was never quite right. I didn't love how they looked on my face. And apart from capturing the video, the AI features are useless to me because they don't support Asian languages. So using that in Japan to just passively capture content could be useful for my app, but like the version of the app that I have today working, it's not ready yet. So, you listen to Mark Gurman over at Bloomberg, and Apple's going to have their own similar glasses in 2027. That's just a year away. And if that happens, then it's like surely going to, well, of course, keep my sex scenes more likely to myself, but more importantly, be integrated with the Apple ecosystem. Whereas like using the Meta app, the app sucks. It's one click into Instagram or WhatsApp, 2 apps I don't use. Well, I want it in my photos library, and I want it to be geotagged just like all my other shit. And I want it to be, pop up in my featured photos and integrate with messages and all this stuff. And this ain't that. So, okay, well, they only get so many nudes of me for now. Maybe I'll be back later. Let's see. Mickle, fan of the show, he writes in every now and then. His tag is Mikker, Mikker. Mikkel Malmberg, nice guy from Denmark. He's written in several times to the show. He wrote me an email back in November. He said, "Did you ever use Quicksilver?" It's like a launcher app for the Mac that predates things like Alfred and LaunchBar. And nowadays Raycast, basically like a nice spotlight that's faster. And learned, like what was novel about it was when you called up an app, it would learn which ones you were calling, so that like in fewer keystrokes you could launch the things that you use more often, which all of these things do now. But Quicksilver's gone, and a lot of these other tools have gotten to be slow and complicated. So he emailed me, consider my app a leader key for predictive launching or predictable launching. I'm working on a completely new launcher close to the original Quicksilver, but modern. Let me know if you want to beta test. I don't know that I replied to this, but later on he told me it launched, and then incredibly, it was featured on the front page of Hacker News. So good job, Mikkel. That's wonderful. And then I was listening to John Gruber. If you want Mac nerds to try your software, getting John Gruber to organically mention it as being cool is really the holy grail. That's the brass ring right there. So on Daring Fireball on the talk show, he just mentioned he struggled with the name, but he got there. The name of the app is Tuna. So tunaformac.com, you can go and just download it and use it, and it's a partially vibe coded, or some degree of AI was involved. I'm not sure what, but it's a nice little splash page. App is great. I'm not in the market for one. I'm using Raycast with like everything turned off. I probably could switch to Tuna at this point. I don't know. Maybe I will. I owe it to Mikkel. He's legit. Thanks, Mikkel. Congrats. That's cool. Check out Tuna for Mac. I'll put a link in the show notes. Another, small upstart. You may have heard of Fruit Company Cupertino released some new products. The MacBook Neo among them. In fact, I'm going to go grab it. This is a real is the dress green or blue or white question, but this is like the citrus colored 13-inch MacBook Neo. It is citrus colored, and sometimes it looks green, sometimes it looks yellow, kind of like a oxidized gold. A less attractive name that they could have chosen. Let me just gently hurl that across the room. So I bought that at launch because I had to send in my actual M4 MacBook Pro that I use every day. I had to send that in because it's got a couple stuck keys. So I was going to be without a computer for a week, and I was like, hey, let's try out this new cheap computer. So the MacBook Neo starts at $499 US if you are buying with an education discount, which I think most people buying this probably should be. You're either in school or you should be getting an AARP discount. This is a great computer for somebody who just needs a classy Chromebook, or for whom an iPad is either too fussy, because to get a similar setup with an iPad, you're talking an iPad Air with a Magic Keyboard, maybe even a pencil, and at that point, like even just iPad Air plus Magic Keyboard is more expensive than this. iPad Air is just more expensive than this. So it is cheaper than that, but Mac OS is pretty locked down. It's pretty hard to fuck up, but still very fuck upable. And every year it gets more streamlined and I would say normie friendly, but it's more complicated. And with just 8 gigabytes of RAM, the MacBook Neo, it's easier to get yourself into a situation where shit gets fucked. And if you are not a computer person, getting yourself out of that state is difficult. So if you just follow like the path of least resistance, most people these days are going to download Chrome. So that's mistake number one. Then they're going to download Slack and download Discord and download Figma and download a bunch of other Electron apps. And so that's mistakes 2 through N. And then they're going to open these things and they're going to be basically constantly swapping to the SSD. And these SSDs are still very fast by modern standards, compared to like where we were in 2018 or 2019. They're quite fast, but they're slow enough that they don't feel like RAM. They chug. And so when the system resources are all pegged, this is the MacBook Air as it exists is no bueno when you run out of RAM. This is just worse. So Reviews have been glowing, and I would say day one of my experience with this thing was very impressive because it was indeed a Mac and it could do everything I do on my Mac. I pulled down Claude Code, I had Xcode running, simulators, tests, compilations, all the things. There was nothing I threw at it that it could not do. Asterisk, but then I left it on overnight, and everything was fucked. Like, the system was completely non-responsive. It was like, hit a keystroke, get a response 800 milliseconds later. I open Activity Monitor, and like Zed, which is a native app, is pegging 5 of the CPU cores on that A18 Pro. And force quitting Zed didn't quite work, and then all of a sudden I've got all these other background things like Mobile Calendar and the Photos agent. Those had all crashed, presumably from running out of RAM. And that's scary, right? Like, if I'm not a computer dude, I don't know what the fuck to do, right? If you grew up in an era where restarting your computer every day was the right move, then just get back into the habit of restarting the computer every day, and you can harvest that extra several $100s of savings compared to like a discounted MacBook Air, and this computer would be great, right? But at 8 gigs, buying this computer today, anyone listening to this, it's probably the wrong investment. Buying a used thing with 16 gigs is probably smarter. And I'm conservative. Look, if this thing, here's the real Achilles heel for the MacBook Neo. I suppose this is my review now. The real problem with the MacBook Neo is that it's not lighter or smaller than the MacBook Air. It is less than. It is 2.7 pounds. The MacBook Air, coincidentally, 2.7 pounds. 13-inch screen, fine. It's true. The software is just bigger and roundier, and there's concentricity of every single corner, even if the concentricity radii are different in every single fucking app. macOS Tahoe is not the same operating system that was running on the 11-inch MacBook Air or even the 12-inch MacBook from 2015. So, yeah, sure. I mean, you need probably 13 inches of screen estate to even operate macOS, and because it feels pretty cramped. In fact, it feels so cramped that at the default zoom level, text seems too small to read comfortably. I like to keep my laptop kind of far on my knees. Too small for that, but then you decrease the zoom level, and now it's like a lot of windows just they don't fit the screen anymore. So the screen size is, sure, it probably has to be 13 at a minimum. I don't know how you would do 12 with the current version of macOS. It's really the weight. If this thing's not going to weigh less than a MacBook Air, then why? Like, if you want the $499 price and you cannot be sussed to find a either used or heavily discounted MacBook Air, which takes all of going to Amazon.com instead of going to Apple.com, right? Then, yeah, okay. But if you got a couple $100, if you've got, the MacBook Air is just a better investment. Better sound, better screen, better everything. MagSafe, so you have one extra port effectively, because you can charge while using the other two. I tried doing, with the developer strap, Vision Pro Mac Virtual Display on it. It worked fine, except for the fact that of the two USB ports, one of them is capped at USB 2 speeds, and the other one is a 10 gigabits per second link. And if you plug into the wrong one, you do get a notice saying, hey, the other port is faster. But guess what? That notice was like, for me anyway, like on a 30-second delay. So I plugged it into one. The experience was shit. I plugged it into the other. I got the warning. And then I started up again, but it was faster. But then I unplugged it and plugged in the other one. I didn't get the warning. So like the warning was actually like so slow at coming up that it wasn't clear to me. I had to open up. I mean, again, granted, people buying this should not be also in the market for Vision Pro to be doing this sort of thing, but you could be plugging in anything. You'd be plugging in an external hard drive. I had to literally go to, because which port is fast and which one is slow is not labeled. Excuse me. Biologically, I'm done with podcasting. So I'd go into About, System Report, go to USB, plug in things both ways to learn that it's the further back USB port that is faster, which kind of makes some kind of intuitive sense to me. And the closer up one is worthless. They both can charge at the same speed, so then you're charging with the one that's closer to you, even though that's the one that's probably got like the wire going away from you, which ergonomically is frustrating. And then of course, the Vision Pro, the developer strap is on the right side of your head, but the ports are on the left side of the body, which means you now need to snake a USB cable around this away. And of course, you've got the power cable coming out the left side of your head if you're on a Vision Pro. So like, shit's fucked. Like, it's too many cables. Apple, the company who brought us Wi-Fi, and then a logo for Wi-Fi. Could have done better. I don't know. For what it is, it's very, very impressive. It's nice to have color. It's anything coming out cheaper these days is a real supply chain flex. Apple's going to sell a gajillion of these. Apple's TikTok is very peak right now. Very, very Gen Z and alpha friendly, and off-putting to older people like me, which I love. I love to be put off. Yeah, I don't know. Good for them. I'm still holding my breath for products that are actually designed for me. And we'll see where that works out. The rest of the PC industry is and has been fucked for lots of reasons. Windows 11 being terrible, DRAM prices being high, Windows ARM apps, Microsoft having to prioritize backwards compatibility versus like paving the way forward for ARM, resulting in ARM computers constantly being less than and worse in the Windows world. Notebookcheck.net does some benchmarks and does some math and says, hey, this in single core performance, this is literally like the fastest laptop you can buy, and it's like the cheap one. It's the one that runs a phone. So phone processor. So PC makers are all on alert. Some stocks are slipping, Yeah, PC suck. The quote here is, the A18 Pro consumes between 3.5 to 4 watts in this scenario and scores 147 points. Presumably the points are relativistically important. This means it is faster than every other x86 processor in our database, including the 2 desktop processors, wow, Intel Core Ultra 9 285K and AMD Ryzen 9 9950X3D, which is a $450, $500 chip. I actually intentionally did not spend to get that chip. I got like the 9850X3D. This also means the MacBook Neo beats every modern mobile processor from AMD, Intel, and Qualcomm, even though the upcoming Snapdragon 2 X2 chips should be a bit faster. Now, keep in mind, the A18 Pro is already a year and a half old because it was the 16 Pro iPhone's chip. 17 Pro has the A19 Pro. And the A18 Pro is also slightly faster than Apple's own M3 generation in this scenario. Now, that's only single core performance, but single core performance is like the one that like we all think of when we're just clicking around and doing shit on our computers. Multi-core only really comes into effect for video editing, encoding, and other tasks that can be parallelized, certain, like development tasks, compilations, and things like that. As I have learned in my foray into audio engineering, that's all fucking single-threaded because of how audio codecs work, and the input-output just having to go kind of serially from one audio plugin to the next. So even though Apple likes to tout the multi-core performance of stuff, and that is indeed very important, the fact that they usually pair it with demos of audio in particular has always seemed weird to me, because you just don't get that kind of lift. But anywho, that's the MacBook Neo. If you picked one up or are interested, you can email me, justin@searls.co. You're also welcome to email me at podcast@searls.co. I will still get it, but just to, the next mailbag might be a while, I guess. Yeah, this one's definitely going to go back. Becky looked at it and she's like, "Ooh, maybe this is the one for me." And the answer is maybe. I don't know. I love her too much to give her another 8 gigabyte computer here in 2026. So of course, the MacBook Neo though it's designed primarily for switchers, people who are maybe they came out and had Chromebooks or a bad time on Windows or whatever, and honestly, like if you just look demographically, like it's for people whose main computer is their iPhone, and maybe they need a computer now, and so it's like if your iPhone is the primary, get the nice one of that, and then get this one for when you need the bigger screen, when you need a real desktop browser, you know, because life still requires that. You can't very easily do absolutely everything from a phone or an iPad. So I think of that as who it's for. But I'm old enough to remember what it was like in the long ago times when Apple's laptops came shipped with optional NVIDIA GPUs. You used to be able to configure your discrete graphics. Boy, that was a while ago. And there was one or two particular generations. I don't know if it was like the titanium MacBook or, well, PowerBook, or a little bit later than that, where there was a high defect rate and return rate, and then they had to do a repair program for some set of Macintosh laptops that were equipped with NVIDIA GPUs. And what I assume happened, and if you read the reporting, it's kind of apparent. Steve Jobs got mad because NVIDIA wouldn't own up to whatever he believed was their responsibility in that recall or service program, and probably wasn't willing to pay their fair share in his mind. And so thus began an Apple-NVIDIA feud where they go out of their way to not partner together. Now, Apple is... like my Italian family, very good at feuding and keeping score for long periods of time. When the Vision Pro was announced a couple of years ago, you noticed that all of the VR stuff, the whole rendering pipeline, you could pass it meshes, but you couldn't actually control the rendering. The rendering was all done through Unity. And Unity was the first class rendering pipeline for the Vision Pro, for Vision OS, because in order to get realistic shading, you need the real light information from the pass-through video in these AR spaces. And to know the lighting so that you could properly shade things would require you to see the pass-through video, which was a privacy no-no. And so Apple had to pick a partner to do the video engine, the game rendering engine for all of these AR experiences with Vision Pro. Notably absent was Epic Games, who had previously been featured on plenty of Apple, keynotes in the past, like when they had their subsidiary Chair Entertainment, who did the Infinity Blade series of games, which we would now call roguelikes, roguelite run-based, very high-end AAA-looking iPhone and iPad games that made for great demos. No mas, right? Because Tim Sweeney and Epic has declared war on the 30% App Store tax, and the subsequent lawsuits and all that. And so we're not going to see Epic and Apple cooperate anytime soon. But if you're asking yourself, well, how long will it be? The answer, apparently, is, 15 to 20 years. Because Apple and NVIDIA are partnering on something. And of course, it's not a GPU. It's not so you can get a Mac Pro with a 5090 in it and then, play AAA games, unfortunately. Apple's still perfectly happy with their GPU hardware and for the most part, their software stack and their Metal pipeline or, API for 3D rendering. This is specifically around streaming and... I suppose just streaming over our network technologies right now. What Apple and NVIDIA have announced and was come in the 26.4 betas for Vision OS, but then at GDC and now at GTC, the NVIDIA's kind of bespoke event, we've learned a couple things. First of all, that like foveated streaming of video content, which I've talked about in the previous edition of the show, will allow you to stream content using just kind of built-in operating system provided APIs on your Vision Pro from something else that's rendering that 3D content, basically offloading the graphics horsepower needed to actually render something, which, like, the M2 or M5, they're no joke, but like to run the operating system and also run like a AAA game it would be a bridge too far to get a decent frame rate. Foveated streaming allows you to stream at a high fidelity just the parts of that your eyes are looking at, with a lower fidelity, if any at all, for the surrounding parts that are maybe only in the periphery of your vision. And then that way, even on a Wi-Fi connection or something with like packet loss or just like normal real world, not necessarily a 10 gigabit wired connection or a USB-C connection to a high-powered machine that's locally right next to you, you can get reasonably good performance even in VR, even at a high frame rate. So that technology underneath is provided, even though it's shipping with the OS, it's being included in collaboration with NVIDIA, which lends one to believe that it's probably some amount of proprietary NVIDIA code that is driving it, because NVIDIA has invested a ton of money into cloud-based streaming, if you're familiar with their GeForce Now service. And increasingly, they're interested in enterprise applications for this stuff. And if you read that Apple developer documentation and you saw the NVIDIA stuff, you're like, well, what's in it for them? Surely they're not just donating this stack so that it can be an operating system level construct so that anyone can benefit from it. And if you read the GDC and GTC stuff that they put out, you more or less realize that what it is clearly there's some level of higher order partnership, and they're more focused, sadly, on the enterprise applications of this. Everyone's got this fantasy of like a person in a factory, wearing a Vision Pro and then doing like very, very detailed diagnostics and offloading that to some sort of cloud AI enterprise computer. And, I'm a technical guy, but that sounds like so overwrought and unlikely to actually materialize in any sort of real way. Because there's just too many moving parts to imagine it really panning out. But, they got a little demo video and everyone looks great. And they're all, of course, wearing the new Vision Pro headset strap. So you can tell Apple's, PR team's involved in all this. One is called Cloud XR on Vision Pro. That's the first set of technologies. So reading from Tom's guide summary of all this. This lets you wirelessly stream PC VR games from your own NVIDIA RTX gaming PC to the Vision Pro up to 4K resolution, 120 frames per second. The first supported titles are iRacing and X-Plane 12. Notably, like, these are apparently requiring the game developer to code in support for this kind of VR streaming themselves, which is disappointing because it would be better just to support the OpenXR or the Steam VR APIs, so that pretty much any game could benefit from it. But you got to start somewhere. So maybe that's just the starting point. This is not the same as GeForce Now. Cloud XR streams from your own local hardware, not NVIDIA's cloud servers. So you do need a beefy PC with an RTX GPU. Second announcement is GeForce Now's VR upgrade. So separately, starting on March 19th, GeForce Now is jumping from 60 frames per second to a maximum of 90 frames per second for VR headsets, which include both Meta Quest and Vision Pro. I have a Vision Pro. I don't believe that there is a GeForce Now app in the App Store. I don't think we've solved that problem. I think you still have to access it via Safari. But Safari is unlike the progressive web app experience on the phones and the iPads and so forth. The way that the WebXR APIs work is like if you're at a website that purports to be peddling in VR experiences in Safari on Vision OS, it will simply bring up a modal dialog that's an operating system dialog saying, would you like to allow this website to engage you in an immersive experience? And at that point, it can basically hijack the lower level stuff in your system. And you're still in the browser technically, but you're not at all in the browser. You're really, it's effectively a WebXR program at that point. And it doesn't mean you have full access to the hardware, but it does mean like from the 360 degrees, the controller and everything like that. As long as the content itself is streaming, it can basically do whatever it wants. So that's pretty cool. And then more recently, NVIDIA on their own blog, this is going to be like 5 links. If you're actually interested in this shit, you can click through. It's mostly a preview of coming attractions, but it says, with this new integration, users can put on Apple Vision Pro and augment their spatial computing workflow with apps like Immersive for Autodesk VRED, enabled by InnoActive's XR streaming solutions. Automatically and natively streaming from NVIDIA RTX technologies, ranging from NVIDIA RTX Pro workstations to GeForce RTX GPUs, whether on PCs or on the cloud. And then they've got a table of the different technologies, including their third-party framework that is more compatible with other platforms, like including streaming to iPads and iPhones, but less integrated with the operating system level, and so therefore a little bit less capable. All that stuff is interesting. As somebody who wants to be able to stream to a high-quality headset VR games from either of these two PCs I'm looking at, I was hoping that the Steam Frame would come out and exist that Valve announced last year. But because it's got 16 gigs of RAM in it, who knows? So if I can, I was going to say repurpose, if I could just purpose my $3,500 Vision Pro for that, well, now I'm going to say purpose again, for that purpose, that would be lovely. Also in gaming, GDC is the Game Developer Conference. The last couple weeks, we've had a few different fun announcements. Asha Sharma, the new CEO of Xbox. I don't know why Microsoft needs multiple CEOs. It sort of feels like, if a CEO can get trumped by another CEO, can get trumped by a board, it's like, who's really the boss here? I guess everyone's working for somebody. If I've watched enough anti-hero TV series to see that even the CEO answers to his spouse, their spouse, who's secretly pulling all the strings. Yeah. Anyway, Asha Sharma, she's the CEO of Xbox Gaming, and she, trying to build credibility after kind of a little bit of a false start coming out as a non-necessarily non-hardcore gamer. Which Twitter didn't love. They assume you don't understand business unless you're also a gamer. Even though that's bullshit. And if anything, Microsoft's tried leadership from gamers before, and it's not necessarily always gone great. She just came out and said, hey, great morning with the Xbox team, or something to that effect. We're excited to share Project Helix, where you're going to be able to play PC games on Xbox. And it's like she just said the thing that everyone kind of already knew, but rather than a big splashy announcement or a video, just kind of said it. And then a couple new sessions showed up on the schedule at GDC, where senior representatives from the Xbox team, the head of Next Generation, among them. So I want to be the head of Next Generation. That sounds like cool. Or the head of Voyager, or the head of Deep Space Nine. One of those. They gave a talk, and they explained how this Project Helix, this new Xbox, is going to work. The new Xbox, when it releases, which will probably be 2027. One of the things we learned is that the development kit hardware is going to land in alpha form in 2027. A lot of people are thinking it's going to get delayed just because of the supply chain stuff. I think enough gears are probably in motion that we'll probably see what we saw in 2020, which is like they got to actually get it out the door, or else they're going to sacrifice downstream components and factory lines and all this other stuff that they've reserved. So even if they end up only making like 10,000 of these fuckers on the first run, because that's the only one that they're able to get a full kit loaded out for, they'll probably do that, and they'll probably just be hard to find. And in this era where scarcity increases perceived value, you just look at how hard it was for me to buy a GPU. It just made me want it more. We're probably looking at a $1,200 to $1,500, if I had to guess, console that is a pretty beefy boy, a pretty powerful high spec for ray tracing, high spec for, and what we learn in this talk is just, I don't know, imagine fancy specs. Like AMD is partnering, it's their next generation of everything. It's a lot of catch up with NVIDIA, but it's going to be they're claiming an order of magnitude more powerful than when it comes to AI compute and a whole bunch of other stuff. And all that's really interesting. In particular, there's two things that are, I guess, more relevant to developers and to people who are playing on PC. One is that the Xbox mode that will ultimately be facilitating, hey, you have this Xbox console, but it can play all your PC games. One way to do that would be to have the Xbox operating system essentially be Windows, but with a nice skin on top. And when you have to boot into another Windows game that kind of needs more of the Windowsy bits and needs to be able to at least be tricked into thinking that it's running in a full Windows computer, in order to have the security standards that you would expect from a console that's sufficiently locked down, one would assume that either you're running every game in its own virtual machine, which, there have been open source tools for like running classic Windows games where they ship like, all of these things in their own VM, but because the VM is only a little diff of the exact version and configuration of Windows needed to get the game running, it's actually not that big. It's not that much storage. So there's a chance it's going to be some sort of virtual machine-like thing. We really don't know. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how much it's going to look like the current Xbox full screen experience, or compare it to how much it's going to look like the existing Xbox operating system. Me, as somebody who's always liked game consoles, playing around, dicking around in what the built-in operating system is probably the most fun that I have. I spent more time doing that in the PS5 than I have in the last 6 years of using my PS5. So I'm very interested to see how they solve this problem. It's a whole lot of UX problems, UI problems, and of course, they got to get out of their own way in terms of software quality and just being able to ship this thing, because Windows has got problems enough as it is. But this Xbox mode is supposedly coming to everybody in April, and one presumes they will probably have a very, very strong resemblance to however it will show up in this new Xbox console. The only difference may be like which mode is toggled on by default. We'll just have to find out. So I'm really excited to try that out. As somebody who traditionally will just play my PC as a very expensive, very powerful console, I would love to be able to just boot it up and then use just a controller and enter my PIN with just a controller and not have to have a wireless keyboard, at hand. So looking forward to checking that out. Verge has a report on what that looks like and what that rollout's going to be, and I will share that link. Separately, the Windows blog, everyone's favorite sub, they have a post announcing new tools and platform updates for Windows PC game developers. So in addition to the Xbox mode rolling out with a full screen experience, they added a couple other wrinkles. This one stood out. Xbox mode delivers a controller-optimized experience to your Windows 11 device, letting players browse their library, launch games, use Game Bar, and switch between apps. Designed to keep players immersed, the experience features a clean, distraction-free interface while still giving them the flexibility to seamlessly switch back to the Windows desktop at any time. One of the benefits of an Xbox mode would be to shut off the Windows part, because there's a lot of background processes, daemon processes, and other things that are kind of like gunking stuff up. And how it works in their current iteration on the Asus ROG Xbox device, the handheld, is as soon as you engage with any of the Windowsy bits, your system is like permanently slower and your frame rates go to shit until you fully reboot the device. So this says you can seamlessly switch back. And one wonders, like, does that mean I'm just sacrificing like the performance gains I would have gotten by turning off the Windows part? Of course, that's something that they're probably trying to solve for, but it'll be interesting to see how they do. Additionally, shader delivery. So like, without getting too far in the weeds, shaders need to be computed based on the particular hardware configuration that you're looking at. The software version, every time there's a new patch, typically they have to be recomputed, and that can take anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes, depending. But it's an annoying thing. And if your launcher is particularly buggy, like Microsoft's traditionally has been, you might find yourself recomputing shaders every time you launch a fucking game just because they don't persist correctly. Steam has kind of solved this for the Steam Deck program handheld, because the hardware is the same on everything, so they can compute the shaders once and then deliver them as if they were just part of the game, making it way faster just to get in. You also have like less stutter as a result because you don't have any compilation. That compilation of several minutes at the beginning of the game is just part of the shader computations. Some of them are going to happen streaming while you're playing the game on demand as you go from one part of the world to another. And that's when you get what's called shader stutter, where it's like, hey, you might be performing really well, but all of a sudden your frame rate drops to shit. Why that happened is all of these shaders are, reticulating splines in the background. So it sounds like Microsoft is figuring out advanced shader delivery for this new era because they have it for Xbox. They need to have it for the next Xbox, so they got to sell it for Windows too. So another thing to kind of make the Xbox store and the Xbox gaming experience a little bit stickier to try to peel off a couple people from Steam is the guess. Another thing down that effect is they have announced that their next GDK, or Game Developer Kit, for the Helix will make it very, very easy to build PC games, because that's what it's always done. And then more or less, not one click, but like as an Apple developer, you can... I can imagine what this would look like, where you like a marginal amount of effort, some extra metadata, some extra tests, some extra configuration, and something that was an iPhone app is now also a first-class iPad app. And a little bit more stretch, it's like also a Vision OS app or a Mac OS app. What the new GDK is going to do is going to make it just like an extra, couple skipping stones, and you've got yourself a Xbox Project Helix deliverable. So if you're going to ship on PC anyway, they want to make it really, really easy to just be on this new Helix platform, and not require you to hop into Windows compatibility mode, but show up in the Xbox store as like a native, fast, super easy breezy, no customization, no jiggery pokery to run it. And then a couple other steps, and you can get all the way back to the current generation of consoles, which no one is buying and very few people bought. Relatively few people bought, merely tens of millions, I'm sure, but it will be able to also port and deliver that same game with as part of the same build, effectively, to cut a new build for the Xbox Series S and X. So they got some story for that, but like they're even their little slide is clear. Like that's the extra mile. You're gonna have to do some extra shit for that. So. That stuff's interesting. Meanwhile, in the rest of the video game world of these gigantic corporations, Sony's fucking around with dynamic pricing. They saw those Taylor Swift concert tickets and they got an idea. The way to do dynamic pricing is to start with discounts, because no one gets mad about a discount. So what they're doing is, and this is a quote from psprices.com, your news source for PlayStation prices, apparently. Since November 2025, Sony has been running A/B tests in the PlayStation Store. Over 4 months, the experiment grew from 50 games in 30 regions to over 190 games in 70 regions, including the largest market, the US. Sony is testing prices on its own AAA titles and launched a new... IPT_LTM program, yes, with elastic pricing. Some PlayStation Store users are seeing experimental prices that are significantly lower than the standard retail price. It looks like a controlled A/B test. Users are placed into different groups and then see different prices for the same games. So people are justifiably concerned that like anything that can be used to strategically lower prices based on my demographics or my buying patterns or random chance and A/B testing could be used to dynamically increase the price of games. And, one person, Danny O'Dwyer, I think, on his podcast and on the No Clip Crew podcast, he was saying, I don't want to have to be in the situation where I'm on an Xbox, or excuse me, I'm on my PlayStation, and the game is full price for me at $59.99 or whatever. But then I log in as my wife's account, who doesn't buy as many games and maybe is more, price sensitive, and the algorithm picks up on that. Well, if the same game is $49.99, $39.99, do I log into her account to buy the license to that game on her and associate it with her? And if I do that, is the $10 or $20 or $5? At what point is it worth it to me to incur the inconvenience of either having to switch to her account or make sure that she's like logged in as primary on all subsequent PlayStations? Because of course now it's in her library and not my library. These are the kinds of questions that like you don't want to have to think about. You don't want the awareness itself of the complexity. And this is one reason why a lot of people don't play PC games, is that knowing that you could fart around in some sort of setting and get marginally better frame rate, just having that in the back of your head means you'll either do it and then not be playing the game, or you'll be playing the game and thinking about those customizations or those other things, that other complexity. And that adds friction to the, what's the thing that like you're being sold when you're sold a game? It's to fucking relax and have fun and chill out and zone out. And it's harder to do when you feel like you're silently being screwed. So, Sony's gotten a little bit of blowback about this, but like it kind of makes sense. They got the data, they got the differentiated like player base. Like it's just like when you go into a store these days, thanks to inflation, like having a little e-ink price tag that can be updated without having stickers, without having to reprint stuff. There's some scary Orwellian article this week about how like even a grocery store could just track you inside and know you're the only one that aisle, and then have the prices go up based on things that it knows about you in particular. I don't know if anything like that's happening yet, but doing that in a grocery store seems like a very complicated dance, and doing it in something like a video game eShop is a very easy thing to do. So I'm not surprised. I mentioned GTC. I do not know what GTC stands for, but that's the thing after your GDC. Note the D as in dick versus T as in tits. GTC is NVIDIA's special event. And they are now using gaming as a sizzle reel, as a thing to get enterprise buyers, I think, and people wearing suits at these places, because NVIDIA has gone from a gaming company to a most important economy, like altering anchor of this AI era that we live in. So I assume that the number of people wearing suits when they show up to NVIDIA keynotes is higher than it used to be. But you can only show them so many server racks that all look the same. In fact, in the supercut of the keynote, where Jensen, the leather jacket guy, he has this weird speaking affect where he'll say like the first part of a sentence, and then he'll just say it again, word for word, and then he'll finish the sentence. And this is really annoying. This is really annoying because then you just find yourself saying the same thing over and over. So I'm going to try to not do that now, but it's just in my head. He himself, while he was showing off all these server racks of these new Verawang and Blackwell and different permutations and the new cooling they have, he like got them confused several times. Is this one? No, it's this one. It's like, yeah, because they all look the fucking same. It's pretty boring. It's hard to keep the momentum up with a long goddamn keynote when all you're talking about is servers, because they all look the same. So you want to add some sizzle to that steak. And now the gaming is really just there as a way to spice things up. It's a way to make visual a lot of the advancements that they are touting. And so you can see this in a lot of companies that are trying to like get people excited about their boring ass crud apps and products by putting some sparkle emojis and calling their whatever AI powered. NVIDIA has in their back pocket the most powerful consumer, gaming hardware in the industry. And so they can just point to that. And so they tried to do that again, and it kind of blew up in their faces in a sense. DLSS or what does it stand for? Dynamic something super sampling. It's been too long now. Basically, like it's hard to render a game at 4,000 Ks. 4K resolution takes a lot of power. What we call rasterization, raster rendering of like taking the full ass image and rendering it 60 times or more per second. It takes a lot of computation, takes a lot of power. And if you could render it at a lower resolution and then upscale it to 4K, then you can get more performance. You can draw more frames per second in that whatever 16 millisecond budget that you have per frame if you're rendering 60 frames a second. And so DLSS, this super sampling, was invented to do that. Your raster render could be at a lower resolution, like a 1080p, and then you could maybe eke out 20%, 30%, 40% more frames if this machine learning based training model was able to feasibly go up from 1080 to 4K. Now, if you're just doing a naive, like double all the pixels, you're not going to, it's going to look like a slightly worse 1080p image, right? Because when you upscale anything, it looks a little blocky if it's not the native resolution of the display that you're looking at. But if you sauce it up with some machine learning on there and you're clever about it, and NVIDIA has a lot of data and a lot of AI computational little doohickeys in all of their graphics cards, but even the ones that lack them, at the end of the day, graphics pipelines are a lot of matrix multiplication, because that's how we render graphics in 3D. And so is AI. And so they're able to leverage their CUDA cores for both AI tasks as well as graphics rendering, stuff. And so even early on, DLSS was a way to take advantage of a not huge part of that hardware and not huge amount of real estate on their chips to upscale what you're looking at. And so in general, it's had mixed reviews. It's come a long way. In addition now to upscaling content, there's frame generation. And so it can interpolate frames. So if you only can render 40 frames per second, it can go in now, and even the upcoming 4.5 version can interpolate just as many frames as needed on an as-needed basis when frames would otherwise be dropped. It can, within a 5 to 8 millisecond lag time, figure out what the frame in the middle would be by knowing a little bit about the next frame as well as the current frame. And like I said, interpolating the results so that you could have smooth motion between them. Now, plenty of opportunities for fuck-ups in here. This can cause shimmering, and it can cause ghosting of images, and it can cause, motion going in one direction. It also adds latency because you need to have some degree of look ahead. And so if you're in a highly competitive game, having something like frame generation or any of this stuff turned on can make you lose a beat, which is why a lot of competitive gamers will intentionally play at lower resolution so that they can get the real rasterized frame rate at ultra low latency. And then, of course, NVIDIA's piled on a bunch of stuff like Reflex to try to claw back some of that latency earlier in the pipeline. I realize I'm talking a lot about video games today, but fuck it. If I don't have a podcast anymore, I guess I'm just have a lot more time to play video games. So it's maybe what I'm thinking about. I will still have a podcast. I will own it. The IP of this podcast will be mine, but I may just be doing something else with some time for a little while. We'll see. Anyway, that was necessary pre-tread to say they announced DLSS 5, and instead of upsampling your skirts, and instead of generating additional frames, which granted, not perfect, still using AI, still makes mistakes, still invents sideburns sometimes and does things that don't make sense. They are now applying what you might call screen space lighting techniques to the rendered assets, meaning I'm looking at a computer character in a rendered scene and it's using other information in the frame, in the video. So it's not showing you reflections of stuff that's off screen. And it's just looking at that, just using the best guess and keeping some temporal consistency from frame to frame so people's makeup doesn't start moving around on them, its models will fill in the gaps, add additional beauty marks and freckles and makeup, and will adjust the lighting to be more realistic. So maybe you're looking at something that looks really glossy and inappropriately lit because there wasn't enough, rays and ray tracing to like properly light this piece of metal. Well, now this takes a pass and says, if our eyes can detect that lighting looks a little bit flat or a little bit low contrast, so can this, because it's looking at the same fucking image. And so if we can imagine how it would look if it looked better, one way to think about DLSS 5 is it will imagine in its own black boxy, biased, and arbitrary way what it thinks better will look like. And to a lot of people, like, everything's just a bell curve, sort of. In a normal distribution of people, what's better to the model will be better to the person. The problem here is NVIDIA forgot that gamers fucking hate AI and generative AI, and they're just like they were very mad about ethics in video games with Gamergate, and just like they got Donald Trump elected with 4chan, and then again with like the men's rights folks and Joe Rogan and all that. Like, gamers are dispositionally like reactionary. A lot of the kind of people who see themselves as core constituents of gamers. I don't call myself a gamer because gamer itself has kind of become a political identity. But gamers tend to be, disaffected men who, whether they're 20s, 30s, 40s, feel like they've had the short end of the stick economically. These are sweeping generalizations. But when you're thinking of gamers not as people who play video games, but people who like spend all day either unemployed in their parents' basement as full ass grown adults playing games, or just people who spend all of their time posting about games on Discords and Reddit and Twitter, that is a group of people who are very, very like feel threatened by AI, who don't like it, and who, under the guise of wanting to support artists and all of the other trends that have kind of enshittified gaming, they've lumped this in with that. And of course, they found common cause with like more progressively minded people, like I've mentioned in the past, like game journalists, who are in relative horror by just the layoffs we've seen across all of these different studios, and how hard it is for artists to make a living in this economy, as well as for just game developers generally. They don't have a lot of places to go. There's no safe haven, and as there's fewer and fewer studios left, the consolidation just results in, you kind of run out of places to turn after a certain point. So NVIDIA should not be surprised that the reactions to this were swift and mocking and talking about things apocalyptically, and often framed through the lens of artist intent. Like, hey, wow, this is Grace in Resident Evil. This is not how she looks like, and you made her look like a waifu, and this looks like an AI slop TikTok filter. And she's got all this makeup on. It doesn't make sense. Because she's actually, and then like you kind of look at the base model, and it's like, okay, so also a unusually symmetrical, attractive face. Like you look at other examples though, and it's just like, I don't know, like Leon looks a lot better in the same game. His hair doesn't look like it's just clumps of polygons. It looks like hair, right? The environments definitely like mostly look a lot better. I would like to use this. I've got a 5090. The demo is running with two 5090s, which is not a configuration that really is supported typically. But they're saying in the fall it's going to come out and run on a single graphics card, and presumably like 5080s will also run it, maybe a 5070 Ti, maybe earlier. They're really good at backwards compatibility. And this is still really early. And what NVIDIA said even at the time was like, the game studio will be able to, how I think of it is like prompt the model and give it some clues. Maybe you feed in super high resolution assets to say, this is our ideal version of what this person looks like. Use this as the guide when you are deciding to apply DLSS 5 and add all this detail that isn't otherwise there in the image. One presumes that was going to be there anyway because they said it. Now, after this big backlash and Twitter and YouTube and everyone getting super angry about it and generating a whole bunch of clicks, NVIDIA has just reiterated this. Yeah, I showed it to a bunch of friends, and basically, the short version is, my friends who follow gaming news online, they knew to be outraged and they replied derisively. And my friends who don't follow video gaming online were like, wow, that looks really fucking good. So I'll let you be the judge. An example, Danny O'Dwyer, again, he an example of a typical critical response. Weird that this impressive lighting tech also randomly turns everyone into a yassified, looks-maxed freak. It's like all this technology can't help itself but sexualize everything it touches, but like through the lens of teenage boys. Yep. I can't argue with it. I haven't seen any more than anyone else has, but that's also sort of like, based on what these models are trained on and everything, like there's going to be significant bias, and one would just hope that like with sufficient prompting, you'll be able to kind of steer it in the direction you want. And if you can't, then developers will probably turn it off, and then modders will just turn it right back on again. Jensen Huang responding to the outrage. The reason for that is because, as I've explained very carefully, I hate when CEOs respond to shit like indignantly. Like, if you'd listen to my throwaway sentence in this 2-hour keynote, you dipshits, then you would know. Then you would not have reacted this way, because of course we are all having facially superficial arguments of fact that don't belie deeper seated biases and fears and emotions. Even though that is 100% what I am doing right now when I say, as I have explained very carefully. Okay, Dad. DLSS 5 fuses controllability of the geometry and textures and everything about the game with generative AI. That is like some word soup. But what he's really saying is it's going to be part of like the developer's tool chain. And yes, this demo had the sign off of these developers, but was surely, slapped on after the fact. The game's sort of already shipping games. Like they showed Harry Potter, they showed the Oblivion remake, they showed Assassin's Creed Shadows, more of the environmental stuff. And yeah, if games are built with this in mind, one presumes that they're going to be a little bit smarter about integrating it into the artistic vision and all that. But the backlash was so strong, one wonders just like, has the well been right and truly pissed in, and is this just going to disappear and we're never going to hear about it again? I don't know. Well, stay tuned. This fall we'll find out. God. Well, that's enough gaming news for now. So I guess in world news, outside of the stuff going on in a video gamer's stream, over in Israel, they've been keeping busy. Polymarket is a website that lets you gamble on anything you want because it just reframes it as a futures market. Because like you're not betting on sports, you're betting on the probability that like a team will win or lose based on some future event, So gamblers on Polymarket were trying to win a bet as to what day and whether on each day Israel would receive inbound missile strikes from an Iran missile. And we learned this because some poor schmuck at the Times of Israel reports that an Iranian missile strike hit like a field of nothing. And then, apart from getting some reactions like, hey, you going to correct the record here? Like, wasn't that intercepted? Didn't the missile break up? He's like, no, I was there. There's a missile. Here's the video. You can see it's clearly like not a dud because the everything went splody times. But then the drumbeat continues. Somebody sends him an email and then he replies, and then they forge an email reply from him saying, yeah, I was mistaken. And then a whole bunch of more people pile on saying, where's your retraction, sir? And only then does he piece together when like a friend of his, an acquaintance, a professional acquaintance, comes like, hey, are you going to update that thing? Like, my friend's asking about it. And then he's like, ask your friend if he's on the Polymarket. So there was a contract that said that there would not be, or would be, inbound Iranian strikes on whatever it was, March 10th or whatever. And this guy is getting to like death threats because hundreds of thousands of dollars, like $900,000 equivalent or something like that, like is riding on the outcome of this. And the only evidence that would settle the contract in favor of, yes, there was an inbound strike is this one guy's article. If you can get him to recant or change what he said or post a screenshot of a forged email, then maybe on these, and this is like what is going to happen in, you know, the deeper cut parlays, the stuff like I always think about the best job you could have is probably to be a kicker on a Div 3 football team, right? Like no one really fucking cares, and you could just intentionally be shanking, make a new crypto wallet and a new account every single time as to whether or not you're the kicker on North Dakota State University is gonna, you know, put it through the uprights or not, or miss 3-point after attempts, you know. I don't know, right? Like so the summary here, right? The gamblers bet that there wouldn't be a strike. He reports there's a strike. They try to get him to withdraw it. Threats escalate. He has to report to the police, and now he's scared for his life. And if you live in Israel, you got plenty of good reasons to be scared for your life, without having a whole bunch of people like sending you threatening messages in Hebrew that they're going to come after you because they staked their claim, not just in the West Bank, but also on Polymarket. So Jesus fuck, like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I don't know, like it's Polymarket, Kalshi, they scratch this itch where you can just sort of see the depravity and the commercialization of literally everything. And then on the other hand, be like, should I be getting in on that? I've got some arcane knowledge. Yeah, but if you're not the insider, you're getting played, is typically how it works. And people who get played do stupid shit. Because gambling's addictive. Meanwhile, in South Korea, speaking of crypto is relevant, by the way, to Polymarket and Kalshi, if you don't know, because like one or both of them does everything on the blockchain. It's like an auditable thing. And pretty much the only way, a famous lawyer in a famous video, or viral YouTube sensation from back when there were only 10 YouTube videos, you know, he had this lecture and he said, you can get away with any crime and you only have to do three things and you can get away with any crime. 1, don't tell anyone. 2, don't go back to the scene of the crime. And 3, don't do it again. You do those 3 things, you'll probably get away with whatever crime you commit. If you commit insider trading on one of these platforms, you've just signed up. You probably don't know that it's all getting like signed on an open blockchain that like outside investigators and auditors can inspect, including like SEC and FBI. So if you win a bunch of bets because you're selling state secrets, effectively laundering them for cash, make a new account before each bet, at the very least. This segment brought to you by ExpressVPN. If you want to watch anime from a different country or commit treason. Meanwhile, in South Korea, police lose seized crypto by posting password online. An AI-generated summary, because I was too lazy to find a pull quote, says, the article describes how South Korean police lost seized crypto assets after a bust by posting photos of Ledger hardware wallets online. Those photos included the seed phrases of the wallet, allowing anybody to access the funds. The incident highlights the importance of secure storage and the risks associated with sharing sensitive information online. Like, you know, I mean, like if you're police, you want to have the photo spread at the press conference with like all the cocaine. Like, hey guys, check out all this fucking cocaine, man. And look what I did. And so in the digital era, we are robbed of that sort of cool bust. And so instead there's like, here's some screenshots of some stuff from the technologies because we cracked the case. But like, they don't know how it works. And so some neckbeard on whatever passes for 4chan in Korea was like, all right, cool. I'll just copy paste that passphrase and like suck all that money out that you just seized. And then does that thing. But I don't know. If you're the cop, then you're like, well, we got a whole new case to solve, guys. I don't know. Seems pretty stupid. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. China. Meanwhile, breaking change, your source for world news. They mobilize a one-person company. Brace yourself for the acronym OPC if you click through this link. One-person company AI startups. So a publication called restofworld.org, which, if it's meant to be a funny name, is a great funny name. Chinese cities, this is a pull quote, are offering free apartments and converting idle data centers into incubators. The image of saying converting an idle data center into an incubator makes me hope that they mean like for nesting chicken eggs and not for housing humans, but it is China. As they compete to attract one-person companies, or OPCs, startups run by a single founder with the help of artificial intelligence. AI automation tools such as vibe coding agents and video generators have enabled individuals to build tech products on their own without the need for venture investments or employees. This is interesting because this is a real thing. Individuals have been able, I did a talk in RailsConf 2019 called The Selfish Programmer. I did another one at Rails World 2024, I forgot the name, The Empowered Programmer. But basically, I'm a one-man show. I built a real product. They are good in these different ways. Here's how Rails helped me, and here's how you can too, right? AI just takes that and makes it way fucking more tractable. And you can dress on it all the other aspects of the business, marketing and sales and customer support and all that, just supercharge it, right? So I've been saying for months that team size is asymptotically approaching zero. One human, maybe zero, but at least one human for now. And we need to grapple with it. I'm talking to founders who would traditionally have hired a bunch of people by now, and they're just happy as a clam, just working by themselves. And they don't understand why the extra communication and coordination cost would be worth a marginal increase in productivity or coverage. Operational coverage is basically the best reason that I've heard from people in terms of why they want to hire additional developers. It's because, the bus factor being one is too much of an operational risk. They want to be able to go on vacation. So if I'm China and I've got a whole bunch of people who have that juice and I can't invest in a million different companies because my economy is not having an awesome time right now. But I do have all this housing available and all sorts of pockets of, cheap real estate that I overbuilt over the last decade. I start to think about I would rather have doorbell. Something tells me that's a FedEx truck and that I should answer it. God damn it. Well, the world continues. One moment. All right, and I'm back. Normally, I would edit that out because I find it unprofessional when life comes at you. If I was that dude in COVID whose little toddler wandered into the background of the screen and then he yells at his wife and stuff because he's doing an MSNBC hit and he doesn't want people to think he's in a bedroom because he's got a fake map on a wall. That's me, right? I would edit out my child. But now that I told y'all I'm kind of going to take a break from podcasting and from contenting, I don't have the gas in me right at the moment to imagine figuring out how to reconstruct that sentence and go back and edit that. So it's staying in. It was Federal Express, and not FedEx G ground, but FedEx E for Express. I don't know why they don't call it Federal Ground and Federal Express, but it's, FedEx E is the faster one with the smaller trucks, more live. Typically, I assume air-mailed, if not ground-mailed. And it's because I got an express replacement for my AirPods Pro 3, which I have been unsatisfied by. Yeah, I had the Apple Care 1. I was like, these fucking suck. The left one's not holding a charge. The case itself doesn't charge on MagSafe consistently. I realize it doesn't center right, but also just like straight up will go days on end not taking a charge from the MagSafe stand I put it on every night. And then the right one sounds like muddled and muffy. Like I put in AirPods and they sounded awesome the other day. And I was like, man, okay, they're not so bad. And I was like, oh, these are my AirPods Pro 2. So, you know, I got a launch unit. Maybe it was a dud. We'll try these out. Sadly, I will lose the engraving because they won't ship me the engraved, replacement. And you don't get to know what my engraving was, although it was my email address because that's what I engrave all my Apple stuff with. Well, just my AirPods. Everything else is like got Find My activation on. So anyway, back to why would China do this? Like, why one-person companies when you have billions of fucking people? And I think the answer is gambling. Why play 100 rounds of roulette when you could play 10,000 rounds of roulette? Law of large numbers is like some number of these, startups will hit. And if you are in the ground floor and have an equity investment in and infrastructure control over like every new startup and you're taking all these bites of the apple, you don't have to scrutinize too closely what these people are building with that stuff. And frankly, even for a centrally planned economy, we live in an era where like trying to predict what's going to hit in this particular moment, not so easy. So this investment in a one-person company from a state sponsor perspective, from a reimbursement perspective, like honestly kind of makes some sense. Would it make sense in the US? Like, I think that's probably irrelevant because the fear of waste, fraud, and abuse, like you look at something like Solyndra, which became a absolute albatross around Obama's neck because like one of several smart energy, loans defaulted because a startup failed because it's what startups do. And then everyone forgets that Tesla also received the same category of loan because this bleeding heart liberal named Elon Musk convinced them. So, yeah, I don't know. That does it for the news. Let's talk about some some content for after this content's all done. Scrubs, Bill Lawrence's TV show from before Ted Lasso, that I think it did a couple things that I really liked. It had good cutaways. It had a well-rounded comedic cast with like people, different role players, but who also did ensemble work really well. It famously more accurate medically speaking than many other actual medical shows. And there was just a certain joy in the cast where you could tell that they loved each other very much, and look no further than Zach Braff and Donald Faison continuing to do all sorts of shit, including like pretty campy T-Mobile commercials together for years. Scrubs is a feel-good show, and it ended on a sour note because they tried to do this 9th season with the Next Generation. It was basically like Saved by the Bell, the new class, and it was not good. Because everything ends. They had a new set and whatnot, and the old set now was an old hospital in LA, and it's torn down. The new set is in Vancouver and has been built to look exactly like the old set, and it's almost uncanny how good it looks. But Scrubs has been rebooted. Reboot. They rebooted Scrubs. Zach Braff is in it. Sarah Chalke is in it. Donald Faison is in it. Carla? I don't know Carla's name. Also in it. Most of the other characters, the guy who played the lawyer sadly passed away. Dr. Cox, forgot his name too. Anyway, he's in the pilot, but maybe he'll make other cameos. But he's sadly not around. But then there's a whole new generation of interns, and it's, Zach Braff's job is Dr. Dorian to return to Sacred Heart Hospital and, mentor and teach and impart wisdom and stuff while simultaneously only ever thinking about himself, which is actually kind of an interesting arc that I'm sure that they'll play with a little bit. It's airing on ABC. It is like a 22-minute comedy. maybe 20-minute. I don't know. Like, these things feel like YouTube shorts compared to how long the YouTubes that Becky and I watch are. So it's not a big commitment. And yeah, I don't know. If you liked old Scrubs, check out this new shit, because it's basically the same show. One thing I noticed right away is that the use of cutaways, which Scrubs and Family Guy and Arrested Development made just absolutely over-the-top liberal use of in the early 2000s. These days, Family Guy is like a cutaway show, and it's the cutaway show. And so when I watch Family Guy, I'm like, oh yeah, cutaways. But like, I'd forgotten that other shows could have ever done them until I saw the Scrubs reboot, and I was like, oh yeah, these are less good than Family Guy's cutaways. But sometimes they're charming. They're expositive. Is that expository? The exposition occurs through them. Another recommendation. I don't know if it's good or not. I don't know if I liked it or not. Becky and I kind of felt like this is just kind of weird. My brother suggested we watch Mickey 17 with Robert Pattinson, a man who I do not like, but was good in the new Batman. You may know him as Cedric Diggory on that Harry Potter movie that my wife has made me watch 18 times. He plays a guy who gets cloned a lot in an outer space voyage with extremely on-the-nose political allegory to our present moment, to go and colonize a new planet. It's very campy. It kind of reminds me of like a mix between Starship Troopers and Lex. Anyone remember Lex? But like the show, not the movie. Lexx. Yeah. Weird fucking movie. It's the politics are really, like I said, like in your face to the point of being exhausting. You got Mark Ruffalo playing kind of like a Trump-like idiot, also with a spouse who's pulling strings. It's, yeah, I don't know. It's a movie. I don't know what I streamed it on, but I didn't have to pay for it, which made me feel better after the fact. It's just like, it's just too long. Like a lot of these things, like a comedic sci-fi movie should be a tight 90 minutes, in my opinion. Seeing this being 2 hours and 15, I was like, okay, the third act. But what I do appreciate about it was, even though it was campy and overly political, over the top in its politicalness, I should say, it was extremely committed to the vision in the way that Starship Troopers was. Starship Troopers was like, we're going to be internally consistent. We're not going to we're not going to cheap out on the sci-fi stuff. We're going to do it as best we can with the technology of the day. We're going to play it straight and take it seriously. And it's only at like a one level of zoom out. Is it like, what the fuck am I, why am I here? And that's for the audience to decide. A more serious sci-fi that I've been watching is I've gone back to The Expanse. I'd watched most of season 1 with Becky when it first aired. It had a tortured history where eventually it gets picked up by Amazon Prime because apparently Jeff Bezos liked it and it got canceled. And he's like, hey, what? I got billions of dollars. So then it became like, I guess they paid lots of money so that they could keep making the show because it was Jeff's favorite show. Which is cool, man. Like, if you're a billionaire and you can use like shareholder money to do that shit, fuck yeah. Get your bag. Find out what happens in season 6, you know? So anyway, I came back to The Expanse, finished season 1. I like it. You know, it's hard sci-fi in the sense that, it's near future enough that the design of stations, the way that thrusters work, the sound design, like a lot of it is more realistic and more grounded than much of what you'll see in other, space sci-fi out there. There are characters, but it's more about the broader political drama of Mars versus Earth versus the people who have been tasked with, over multiple generations, mining the asteroid belt, belters. And I don't know. It's a good thing to. I feel like we're in an era right now with just so much awesome AAA like prestige sci-fi television, thanks in no small part to Apple TV seemingly funding that entire, like, if you got a sci-fi novel and it blows up Apple's going to call you, and then they're going to make a show. So it's good. I mentioned last time, still working through Halt and Catch Fire with Becky. Just as good on the second watch. You should totally watch that show, especially if you like computer talk. Yeah, only other thing I got down here, it's a gaming thing. Be warned. I know it's a lot of gaming stuff today, but my history with PvP, player versus player gaming, is limited. I don't like what is now called a sweaty game. I don't like games where I have to pay a lot of attention because I like to watch the TV on in the background. I do it to relax. I don't do it like, for the biggest reason during my career and during college, I fell off of PvP games because it's like my day was tense enough as it was. I don't need to be flooding myself with stress hormone, even if it's of the healthy, relaxing kind, for fun. I want to chill out and cozy game it up, right? A lot of hundreds of hours of Stardew Valley and Harvest Moon games, right? But now that my life is free of the humdrum stresses of corporate policy and sales of, and sales falling through and employee dissatisfaction and all these things that would really keep me up at night because I wanted everyone to love me. On top of being financially successful, it was also important that everyone loved me no matter what forever. Still important. If you love me, write in justin@searls.co, and if you don't. The last PvP game that I was truly hooked on, like truly just like addicted to, was Unreal Tournament, the 1999 Epic Games release. Followed Unreal, which was a single player campaign based game, and of course the basically opening salvo of what became the Unreal Engine, later resold and just kind of conquered the industry. I didn't like Unreal, but I liked Unreal Tournament a lot because it was a fast-paced first-person shooter. You're in, you're out. It was a tight control. It felt good. You'd insta-gib, so you could just and you had arena mode, so you could have 14 people on a map, and you would just all start the game in last man standing mode. Everyone's killing everybody, and then if you got killed in insta-gib, gib is, I guess, blow up into little giblets. It's not insta-gib, though. We don't say insta-gib in this family. If you got killed, you had to spectate for the rest of the match. But because it's one-shot kills and there's only 14 a year or whatever, the matches are pretty quick. And so you'd learn a lot from watching other people. Now, there's a million different modes in this game, but that one was the one that I was most attracted to because it was that was focused on movement and positioning. And so I got really good at double jumping my way out of certain death. And I learned a lot about how hitboxes worked and understood the hitboxes on the large character models are actually slightly different than the ones on the small ones, things like that. I would play that. And then there was somebody who wrote a mod or a server side hack to make it so that people would actually pair off and it would turn it into a round robin tournament. So it would be 1v1 and everyone else is always spectating. And then eventually you'd kind of get to this the finale between two people. And I was actually pretty good. I really enjoyed that game. I also enjoyed X-Wing versus TIE Fighters multiplayer mode, which, I think I've linked to in the past in the blog, at least. The network engineering to make X-Wing versus TIE's multiplayer feel right on 28.8 kilobit per second modems is absolutely absurd. The things that they did were so clever from a network engineering perspective, but I didn't know any of that. All I knew was I was able to dial up and play a really cool space sim as an X-Wing or as a B-Wing or as a TIE fighter or a TIE interceptor. And, I would get on chat with other guys, and mostly guys. Some amount of voice calls happened, but you would need the modem line and then also the phone line. A lot of them were legit in the Navy, working 9 to 5 and playing this game, which I thought was interesting. So I played those, but now we're talking the late 90s, early 2000s. I played Halo 1 a lot in college. We all had Xboxes, or enough Xboxes, where you could play on the LAN. From one dorm building to the other, we were on the same subnet. So we had like, 4, 5, 6 rooms with Xboxes, and each had 4 controllers, and you could play up to 16 players over 4 Xboxes in a single LAN-based match. And so we all played all the time. Ate a lot of pizza, took turns at the controllers. We had like 10 guys in Mark's room, actually. I mentioned Mark earlier. And we'd play all night and order pizzas and have just a real wholesome time shooting each other. We would call each other after each match to trash talk on the inter-office kind of phone lines to the other rooms of the people playing. And it was just great fun. And we did that for like a year and a half. And then Halo 2 came out, which was online, Xbox Live. And like, I kind of just totally fell off. Like, Halo 1 was better. I liked how it felt better. I liked the offline nature of the locally networked stuff. Xbox Live just added a lot of steps, and then you're kind of trapped in this weird matchmaking. After that, I've avoided player versus player entirely until Marathon came out. Marathon is Bungie's latest game. They're the people who made that first Halo game. And I am surprised and delighted to say that, of all the Halo games they made after that, of Destiny 2, I never really liked how things felt. I didn't like the movement. Movement after Halo 1 felt sluggish. The gunplay felt good. I mean, I did play a lot of Destiny. The gunplay felt good, but the physics in Destiny was really floaty. And you could explain that in terms of you're on all these small planets and shit and gravity's all fucked and such. But it didn't, the movement didn't feel right to me. PvP especially didn't feel right to me in Destiny because it was mostly a player versus environment PvE game. And, but I did like that aspect of it because it wasn't competitive per se. It was, you and a couple other people usually against a bunch of computer bots. And this new Marathon thing, though, it is what is called an extraction shooter. If you are not familiar, it is a game where you bend over and you will die. And when you die, you will lose all your shit. And you can take whatever shit you want into the game. And if you die, it's gone. And you can take in free shit too, but then you suck. But hey, at least it's less stressful because then death costs you nothing. But oh, sweet baby Jesus, if you go down to the planet as this runner, you're on Tau Ceti, this human colony in a distant future, and you're a consciousness that can just download into these shells, wave after wave of automaton, and you can play with 2 friends in a threesome. You could play solo. You could also just fill with randos in a threesome. This game has gotten its claws in me because apart from the gunplay being great, the movement being great, the theming being like everything from the videos that play in the loading screens to the story of the different factions through which you earn reputation. I think I'll link to an essay that just the title is exactly how I feel. I cannot stop thinking about Marathon. It's not that I'm thinking about how I'm going to play it or what I'm going to do or, on this run, I have this idea for this thing I want to try. It's just being in that world and the way that the progression and the contracts and the objectives in front of you. It's like, well, I'll get a little bit of this. It's something about the experience just hits all of the right notes for afterwards me to feel like this artificial elation. Like I exfiltrated. Like last night, I played as a character type called the Rook, and the Rook is different than all the other normal ones, which kind of fill typical hero classes of I'm the medic, I'm the recon person, I'm the assassin, I'm the thief. I'm the army guy. You can pick which one, and they have different traits. But the Rook is special because it is always solo. You can't go in with anyone else. You can't take anything in. And then instead of starting the normal 30-minute match and trying to do missions and loot stuff in the next exfiltrate, you can't do any missions. You just show up some amount of time, usually halfway through the match. So some of these players are already dead. They've killed each other. They've been killed by AI. And you're just a scavenger. You just go and you try to find shit, pop off people before they get out because they're probably wrapping up whatever they're going to do. And then you exfiltrate. And I had a really dicey exfil. I was just first time ever doing Rook. I was like, I'm just going to loot some shit because I don't have any good shit right now. Found some decent shit, filled up my inventory. I was like, all right, I'm just going to get out of here. And then, of course, as I'm getting out of there, a whole bunch of motherfuckers show up, AI guys and then human guys. And because when you try to exfiltrate, it creates this big beam of light and it attracts everyone to you from very distant. places. And it takes about a minute to charge up, and it takes 10 minutes to get out. And of course, like, very last second, I murder all those motherfuckers, and I get out. And heart's racing. And the loot I got is mostly worthless. I got a little bit of experience points. I got like a little bit of, rep with the rewards are there to make it feel like even when you fail, you're working towards something. It's not totally lost. It's not a total reset. It doesn't feel like, because that would make it feel pointless if it was just like, yeah, play a match. It makes me feel however it makes me feel, and then I'm done playing the match. You play a match, it makes you feel strongly negative, strongly positive, but like with this one more turn kind of hook that is, I think, advanced by the particular, very carefully designed progression system, which it's Bungie having learned all of the things from Halo in terms of like what makes a good lore and a good story and a good kind of like basic mechanics. And then all the things from Destiny, like what makes actually Destiny is an absolute lesson in game design, like understanding the loops and how to keep people hooked. But if you get into Destiny, you realize you're just kind of in these 8 different time-based loops, and you're just doing the same thing over and over again. And a lot of that complexity actually robs you from enjoying the game part of the game where you're going down and shooting stuff. We'll see where Marathon shakes out, but usually getting involved in these things in the beginning of their journey as opposed to the end, there's still a lot of mystery. The theming, like I said, is like really just distinct. You're on a planet full of neon fucking shit, and everything's confusing and everything's different. You have these weird cybernetic races, like with different motivations and factions that like have different objectives. They all kind of, there's the one that's the agricultural one that's trying to restore, like recoup their investment on this failed colony to get like all of their assets off planet. And then you got the one that's like, oh, we just are here to murder people. You want to be part of our murdering people faction? I'm like, yeah, I don't know, but like your upgrade tree looks pretty slick, so sure. They have the separate upgrade trees, but the menus themselves, the menus are designed to exist as believably inside of that world, and it feels that way. So when you're in that game, there's just, especially when you're playing solo, it is a horror game. It is terrifying because around any corner could just be some other fuckers who fuck you up. And if you're like me and you're not particularly good at PvP, good at killing people, like just surviving is a huge success. So yeah, it's sweaty and it's hard and it's all kinds of no fun in a lot of ways. And I just can't, I keep coming back. So I don't know how long that'll last. I've heard already that like when I'm in Japan, I will probably not be playing it unless I can figure that out, because they have like the matchmaking just takes forever. And also not a lot of people are playing outside of like Western time zones. So we'll see. So I'm just enjoying it for now. I think that's it for recommendations. Do you got anything? What's that? You can't talk? I can't hear you. That's part of the problem. I'm going to try being less unidirectional in my life. So I am, believe it or not, I am looking for friends. Not just in Marathon, where I bought my first PC headset with a microphone ever in over 20 years of playing PC games. Over 30 years of playing PC games. That's how, this is a big milestone for me. I'm like playing in my office with like a cool mechanical keyboard that Becky bought me. I am a different goddamn person right now. She's right to be worried about me. I'm still looking for friends. I'm looking for friends in the game and outside of that game, just generally friends. So justin@searles.co. Hit me up. Tell me what's up. These are the last 4 people who emailed me. Well, 3 of the last people who emailed me, and then 1 email that I found this morning that I apparently misfiled.
You've got mail.
I'll start with the one that I lost. Nate. Hello, Nate. This was just in the wrong project in my Things app, so I didn't see it right away. He wrote this in February. It was about the buying a Nintendo Switch 2 in Japan, which was not region locked for games, but language locked, he points out. You didn't say it. You didn't say it did, but FYI, the Nintendo Switch Japan domestic, the Nintendo Switch 2 sold in Japan, that's the domestic mode one, requires a Japanese domestic Nintendo Switch online account. Your library ain't coming with. I tried. I had forgotten this little wrinkle. I think that I've hand waved away it because I have a Japanese region Nintendo account that I use to shop in that e-store. I actually don't have a very large Switch library, so this isn't the end of the world, but I think if my Western account can't be logged into or can't access its library, that would indeed be a bummer. So definitely not worth trying to save a couple $100 and probably the right way to slice it from a design perspective. I was thinking about this the other day that, you know, a lot of gamers are salty because like a lot of the world is dealing with really shit prices right now. And to know that Nintendo is apparently subsidizing the hardware and taking a $130, $150 loss on every console sold only to Japanese speaking nationals. That is a little bit shitty. But, you know, they're a Japanese company and they know that that audience and the loyalty of that audience is their bedrock, and they're willing to do it. Okay, it's a decision, and it's fine. But I suspect what'll happen if things ever get cheaper, or like later on in the Switch 2's lifespan, I wouldn't be surprised if a software update in the future unlocked those domestic consoles for use by anybody. Maybe it won't happen, but it's definitely the kind of thing that like Nintendo could reallocate a bunch of inventory later in its life, especially once you see like the OLED version and you know, enhanced hardware product and revisions of the console come out. Well, we'll see. Thanks, Nate, for the heads up. I will not be buying one now. I probably wasn't going to buy one, but I will definitely not buy one because it's not worth the hassle. Jason writes in, hi, Jason. The subject, the Grinch swings. He says, I caught up on an episode I must have skipped. Listened to turbinates. Turbinates are the little turbines that live in your nostrils that I had cut down to size when I got my nose job last year. Jason says, you're talking about key parties. Okay, so back up. I was probably joking about the fact that a key party was both a 1960s era thing where you take Quaaludes and then have sex with other people by like everyone would have a fishbowl and put your keys in. Then like, you know, one spouse would throw in the keys and then like spouse of the other gender or a different gender would take a key out and be paired with that person for adult entertainment moments and stuff. The Quaaludes, I think, were a helpful ingredient in that recipe, and maybe that's why key parties fell out of fashion. Also, AIDS didn't help, or other STDs. The other kind of key party is nerds who use GPG keys, public-private key pairs, to authenticate that they are who they say they are. In order to do that, you need a chain of trust, so you need other people to sign your key. And to sign your key, if you're playing it straight, you got to like look at the person's ID, you got to look them in the face, you got to say, are you really Kaiser Solsay? And then they say, yes, absolutely. And they're like, okay. And then you sign their key. And then that way that lends them more credibility because it's like, okay, well, this person is probably who they say they are because their key has been signed by all these other guys. And I know I'm connected, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon to this guy. So you'd actually have events where people would go and meet in person very often. Like, I don't know, like events, like I'm saying it asked a lot today. Butts. You'd have, I don't know about standalone events that are just for the purpose of signing each other's GPT keys or whatever. But I have been to several conferences that had like, all right, and then on Thursday, we're going to do Magic the Gathering from 1 to 2. And simultaneously over in the cafeteria, we'll have a key party for key signing. I participated in neither of these things, and I think I witnessed Aaron Patterson participating in both. Impressive. So yeah. Again, Jason, back to Jason's email, which is a sentence long. So I have to share the trivia that you may know. There is a sexy swinger key party scene in The Grinch. Not the animated one, not the classic, not the Dr. Dolittle. No, wait, no. Dr. Dolittle. Dr. Seuss. Look at me. The Jim Carrey version, when they're explaining how he was found. What? I've not watched the Jim Carrey version of The Grinch. And I've never wanted to until right now. So maybe I'll check that out. What? All right. Thanks, Jason. All I want to know, when the Grinch was found, was he vaccinated? Was the fact he was vaccinated why he had all those problems? That would explain a lot of Jim Carrey shit. And not just being married to Jenny McCarthy. Brandon writes in. Hi, Brandon. This is maybe my 6th email that I've read about pears and how long they take to get ripe. Brandon writes, you recently lamented that pears are rock hard until they ripen, and then they rot after just a couple days. Yes, I've got a lot of scientific experimental data to support this hypothesis. He says, I buy a lot of pears, and I've found that if I set them out until they're just a bit soft, just ripe, and then I put them in the fridge, they'll stay perfectly ripe in my fridge for weeks. And if I put them in the fridge immediately, though, they just stay rock hard. They remain hard. If they are hard and I put them in the fridge, then they remain hard and they don't ripen. And yep, that's true. It's a good point. It's also true of avocados. So you got some avocados and you're like, have the same kind of problem. You can just get them to just about where you want them ripeness and then throw them in the fridge and then they're good. It works for certain types of ripening. I've learned over the years. Does not work for bananas. Bananas will continue to get all fucked up if they get too cold. You know, the brown peels and all that pretty much immediately. But works for pears. So thanks, Brandon. Good reminder. Next time I buy pears, I feel like I've learned my lesson on pears, which is too bad because the experience of having a whole bunch of rotted pears in the house makes me viscerally uninterested in buying more pears anytime soon. So I think this is a piece of advice that I'm going to have to save until next pear season. We'll see if I'm podcasting again. The next time pears are cheap. If anything's ever cheap again, I don't know. In fact, we still have fruit. I feel like I'm eating a lot of fruit these days because I just don't know how long we're going to have it. Andrew writes in about version 52. He's got a few different things. So I suppose I should honor this. I think you explaining the title is becoming my new favorite recurring bit. It's almost like a pun, which brings me to Aaron should get to rank your titles. That's very nice. The protein ice cream shake is genius, and I will be incorporating this into my life. Yes. Every night, I have a little treat. I have like literally 150 calorie protein shake with just some like Splenda and almond milk. And then it's a rock hard thing. And then I just use a drill press called a Ninja Creamy to turn it into something that's almost like ice cream, but like more like ice cream than like one of those quote unquote like keto or healthy ice creams like Halo Top, which just kind of tastes like snow cone packed into a pint shape. If I'm at a store, right, and there's like a $7 fancy healthy ice cream pint and because pint is a unit of volume, not of weight, right? And then I like graters or like a nice like French pot like heavy fucking ice cream. If one pint of ice cream costs $4 and weighs 5 times as much as this other pint of ice cream that costs $7, who we fooling? Anyway, like this is a good way to get a lot of volume of frozen stuff in your face, and that's my goal. So go for it, Andrew. I support you. On the topic of AI, we've also been struggling with the AI is draining experience at work. On the one hand, I'm often blocked because I churned out a dozen PRs in a day and my team of 6 doesn't have time to review them. because they are on call, because they're also churning out a dozen PRs, etc. Then on the other hand, I can't keep up with the rate of PRs that my teammates are putting out. Setting aside the you must have code review for compliance reasons for a moment, how do you see things going in terms of code review? Obviously, you're working solo now. Hell yeah. But if you were still at test double, what do you think your approach to code review and the increased volume of change due to AI coding would be? Well, here's my secret, is I've always been opposed to code review. Code review in the before Agile, before GitHub days was a exercise in self-flagellation. I would take my ThinkPad and I would go into a war room or a meeting room, and my colleagues and my team would show up, and I would put it up on the screen, right, on a projector with my VGA cable. And I would be like, all right, well, here's my code. And then they'd be like, oh, I see a warning there. What's that warning? Oh, why do you have a compilation warning? What's that about? I was like, I don't, can we focus on what I did? No. Like we shouldn't be shipping any compilation warnings. And then a 20-minute conversation about whether to have compilation warnings or not, or whether to allow those to be committed would ensue. And then everyone would forget why we were there. And I would be so not traumatized, but shell shocked from being under threat for that long. That nothing of value was learned or discussed. So that made me pretty just temperamentally against code review. And then I found extreme programming. I'm like, oh, collective code ownership, where everyone's pair programming on everything. And then every card, every feature is additionally QA'd or reviewed by another pair who mostly is focused on tackling the problem of really testing the fences on from the outside. Like, does this work? Does it work with hostile feedback? If I put it under load and load test it, what are the ways it could break, and then get creative about it instead of just focused on, minutia about code style, which is where pull requests typically get lost. The code style stuff should be generally solved with a formatter or a linter. Code organization, yeah, it matters, but the way you get that normalization should be through pairing and through consensus on the team, not this extremely slow, extremely asynchronous process where the only time anyone sees anyone else's code and the only opportunity to chime in on whether you like it or not, or whether it's concordant or not with how you're doing things, is this gate check later on, days or weeks after the code has been written. And it's in a non-executable environment. So you're just glancing at it, and you're probably separately eating a sandwich, and you're just kind of taking pot shots. Nothing about that makes any fucking sense to me. Either pair with the person and get on the same page about how you're going to organize code, or let it ride and trust other people and have good enough tests and good enough linters to be able to catch the very obvious stuff. And if somebody's shipping a bunch of broken shit into production, if they do it a lot, that's on them. I don't know, man. So I've generally always been kind of anti-code review. And then when pull requests got more sophisticated on GitHub in particular, it just brought us way back to the other end in terms of being kind of dehumanizing, kind of anti-collaborative, I would say. So, there are moments where pull requests are the only way. It's if you're doing open source and you're genuinely just asynchronously working on something, you don't have a working relationship with this person, and they're sending you some code that is when a pull request is a great user interface, because it's better than nothing. And nothing is where we were starting. We were starting with patches. Diffs in patch files being sent over a mailing list was my first experience, working on service mix for Java, because that's where it was hosted. That was terrible, right? And putting that diff up or that patch file up for review on the mailing list was an awful experience for all parties. They'd have to go and then pull it in and apply it and test it. So where I'm at, I guess this is my last word on AI development. Some people have been shocked that a lot of my code, I don't look at the code anymore. I generate it, I have it write tests, I dog food really aggressively, I make sure it's working. And it's fortunately, I'm not, steering any space shuttles or anything with this shit. So I can afford for it to be imperfect, and it can have bugs. But if I'm able to aggressively use this software that my agents are spitting out, and it seems to be working, and I can verify that it's doing it's fulfilling its purpose, then that's good enough. And treating the code like a black box actually forces me to get really good at the other verification steps. It forces me to dog food really aggressively, forces me to write this whole prove it harness that really, really beats the agent over the head to get closer to, I don't want to waste my time verifying that something's working when it's a very low probability that the thing will work. So it forces me at the front end to increase the likelihood that the thing will work by coaxing verifiability and baking that into the process by beating the agent over the head with all of these different tricks and gizmos to kind of lead the horse to water, so to speak. If I were also looking at the code, not only would I get derailed, I think that's the one that comes to mind most for people is like, well, if you're a perfectionist, if you care how the code is structured, you're going to look at it closely and you're going to get kind of sidetracked like, oh, you should factor it this way, or you should name it this or this or this. And there are generally things that I would probably catch that would be valuable there. And there's also stuff that would just be a pretty big time sink. But more importantly, that would give me, over time, we would have this vigilance decrement occur where we think that we're kind of we've read the code because we've scrolled through it once and we've glanced at it, so we know it, so we can trust it. And you do that and you're robbing yourself of the urgency of, I really got to make sure this shit works. I got to run it. I got to interact with it. And I'm not, in an ideal world, you would do both 100% effort and attention, but ideally that's the case. But in a real world, it's not realistic. If you have to pick one, much better to actually run the shit and optimize for the creation of shit that runs right the first time. And if a review has to happen, and I do review the code, it's called more agents that are free of the context of the thing that's doing the development, hitting it from a bunch of different angles. And one thing Prove It does is after it thinks it's done, it'll signal that it's done. A reviewer will come in, an agent reviewer, running also a very good model. It'll do a bunch of research. It'll come back with some findings, and then the developer will fix those findings, and then it'll trigger the exact same reviewer, again with fresh eyes, to go and do another review. And only once things settle down and the new reviewer can't find anything wrong, that's when it's actually done. That is a way more effective review process than any human review I've ever seen. And us continue to feel attached to this human gate check. Now, regulatory stuff aside, to your point, I think that's an emotional thing at this point. I think it always was an emotional thing. I think it was a comfort blanket for people to hope that was going to catch things. And I think that time would always have been better spent elsewhere, probably on collaborating together in real time, but also just a poor use of time generally. Unless you're in an organization full of incompetent people, in which case fire the incompetent people and then you free up even more time and money. So there you go. One last follow-up from Andrew, and then I guess that's just the last email for some amount of time. Congratulations to Andrew for having the last word. Here are the plant shelves I was talking about. Oh, great. Thanks for a picture. This is great podcast content. Granted, I could have read this email in advance, but I chose not to. I am looking at wood shelves, and one of the shelves has a plant on it, I'll admit. There are grow lights mounted to the bottom of each shelf. So shelf, plant, bottom of shelf above that shelf has grow lights on it. Do we call them grow lights if it's not marijuana, by the way? I'm not a hydroponics expert. The shelves are on drawer slides so I can pull them out for easier watering. Oh, that's cool. And if I ever need to fuck around the lights, they're awesome. Cool. I assume this is in reference to an email I did not understand earlier. But if you're looking for really great planter tips for how to orient your grow lights, I guess hit up Andrew, because I'm not going to be reliable for that for much longer. hey, I'm pro plant. I don't have the experience. I'm honestly, I'm a little distracted. I'm looking at this picture being like, is that a marijuana? Do I know what a marijuana looks like? I don't have a lot. I don't have a green thumb. All right. Well, I guess that's it. That's all I got. It's tried to give you a few hours, something to listen to here on this show that doesn't matter. Thanks for the time. I'm not sick. I'm not dying. I just don't want to be here anymore.